Imagine looking forward all year to a peaceful vacation. You're dreaming of savoring the gorgeous weather alongside your soulmate. What you don't anticipate is encountering pure evil and never making it back home. But in May of 2002, that's exactly what happened to one couple. This is their story. Before we begin, this story revolves around a very popular vacation destination. The location this time is Ocean City, Maryland. It looks like the perfect, fun-filled resort town with something for everyone, from miles of beautiful beaches to the iconic boardwalk. Swimming, sunbathing, building sandcastles on the beach, for many it's the perfect little getaway party town. The boardwalk is lined with arcades, rides, and shops, and at night it turns into bar-hopping territory. Here you'll find a variety of bars, including the Purple Moose Saloon and the Drunken Crab. These bars are known for their live music, dancing, and party atmosphere. But if you're looking for something a little more low-key, you can head to the downtown area. Here you'll find bars like the Tap House, the Irish Pub, and the Green Turtle. These bars offer a more relaxed atmosphere with pool tables, darts, and other games, plus good food. This area attracts so many people, 500,000 during the holiday and summertime. It's about 100 miles from Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington, so it draws in residents from a lot of different locations that aren't too far away, but it feels like you're in another world. In 2002, 4 lives would collide in this vacation beach town. 2 couples, hoping to get away from work and spend a fun-filled weekend in the sun, would become involved in one of the most horrific situations. But before I tell you how they met and found themselves in Ocean City, I want to go back in time to introduce you to each of them. Let's start with Erika Elaine Grace. She also had a nickname, Laney. She was born on February 3, 1978, in Roaring Spring, Pennsylvania. Her parents were Charlotte Grace, whom everyone called Cookie, and Gerald Mitchell Grace, who went by Mitch. Erika was the Graces' only child, and they gave her everything they could because they were well off. Mitch owned a contracting company, which afforded the family a very comfortable lifestyle. With only one child, they doted on Erika, giving her anything she wanted. She was their pride and joy, but with that pride came pressure because Mitch always expected excellence from her. She was expected to be an overachiever and to become something great. It was in junior high when Mitch discovered what that something was for his daughter: basketball. Erika was very athletic from a young age and had tried many sports, but she excelled at basketball. Once Mitch saw her potential, he knew he had to be deeply involved in her basketball career going forward to help mold her into a star athlete. You might say he was obsessed with her success. Mitch took pride in their family's work ethic. He said it was in their bloodline. He was a construction foreman at 20 years old, a superintendent at 21, and he started his own construction business at only 22. He expected Erika to carry the Grace family name with pride. Roaring Spring is a small town with only about 3,000 residents. In such a small town, there's only one elementary and middle school, and they're right next to one another. Spring Cove Middle School is where Erika got her start on the court, with her dad as the coach of her team. Sure, she was only a middle schooler, but Mitch had big plans for little Erika. And I say little, not just because of her age. She was also very tiny and skinny. She was petite, and because she didn't have height going for her, Mitch began honing in on Erika's skills as a point guard, which is often referred to as the heart of the team. However, this position is usually best for an aggressive player, someone who is able to strongly lead the entire team. The point guard is essentially the coach on the court, passing the ball to open players and pretty much calling all the shots. The thing is, Erika's personality off the court didn't match up to the one she had to portray on the court. Erika was shy. She could hardly speak unless she knew you. You would see her standing in a corner all by herself, but she knew well enough that on the court, she had to play her part, especially with Daddy watching. In real life, Erika was a goody-goody. She was always concerned with not getting in trouble, even making sure to call out other kids who weren't following the rules. This was most likely due to her upbringing. Her mother was very strict, and of course, Mitch had high expectations. It wasn't just in sports. Erika was expected to excel academically as well, and she did. She was always on the honor roll. Her home life consisted of being molded into pretty much the perfect child. She was pretty, she stood out, she was unique. She had very tight, ringlet-like curls that many girls her age envied, because this was the time when perms were very popular. Everybody wanted those perfect curls, and they came naturally for Erika, which made her stand out, in addition to her big blue eyes and bright smile. An all-American beauty with brains to match. People that knew Erika's mom, Cookie, described her as the typical trophy wife, a former nurse who now spent her time looking after Erika and the household. She enjoyed shopping and decorating the home, and Mitch absolutely adored Cookie. They had a bond that was unbreakable. As Erika grew up, she admired the love and devotion her parents had for one another. Not even she could come between them. If they had to choose, they would choose each other over anything or anyone else. Every time, Erika hoped that one day she would have a relationship like theirs. It was a fairy tale marriage, even though there were times when Erika said she felt like a third wheel, and she would express that to her friends. Mitch's dismissal of others caused a huge rift between him and the local basketball community. Erika was a starter on the varsity basketball team going into her freshman year at Central High School, something that was unheard of. This made Mitch appear as though he had somehow been able to influence this decision. But as Mitch fought for his daughter to get even more time on the court, he decided on a couple of things. One was to gather up the best of the best players and form an AAU pickup basketball team. These are amateur, competitive traveling teams, and this experience can be a valuable tool in gaining exposure to college coaches, which is what Mitch hoped for. The other decision he made was to move out of Roaring Spring and build a 2-story, 10-room, beautiful Tudor-style home in Hollidaysville, Pennsylvania. It had a big swimming pool in the backyard, but most importantly, a half-court indoor basketball court. Erika would refer to this home as the mansion, and it would be to most of us. Now, Erika could get private, professional coaching and practice even more because the court was inside her house. That's dedication to his daughter, or maybe living vicariously through her. Every night, Mitch would be on the balcony overlooking the court, watching Erika train. When she wasn't with her coach, he would spend hours passing the ball to her so that she could practice her three-point shots, which was her go-to move. Her high school coach, Joseph Hurd, said that she had a fierce outside jump shot. Where they were living, just the name Hollidaysburg says it all. It's called the best place to live in Pennsylvania. Another small town, the population has stayed under 6,000 for at least the last decade or so. Hollidaysburg is a historic town with a lot of charm. The reason many people want to live here is because the town is so close-knit. But the reason Mitch wanted to live here was probably because it's a small town where his daughter would be a very big fish. Just south, there's a bigger city called Altoona, where the population is much larger, about 50,000 people. So that's where all the businesses are, the restaurants, the popular hangouts. Speaking of hangouts, what about Erika's social life? Well, she was popular and well-liked growing up, mostly because of being a star athlete. She made some of her closest friends from the team she was on. One of those friends was Kristen Heinbaugh, who played on that same competitive team as Erika, and they got to know each other better than most. Erika wasn't into the things that other kids her age were getting into: parties, boys, drinking. No. Erika's main focus was to make her daddy proud and get a full college basketball scholarship. That meant keeping her grades up. She would stay up all night, very late, after practice to make sure she finished all her homework. She would get annoyed by other classmates who seemed to half-ass their work because she was a perfectionist. This made her the target of bullies in high school. One time, someone broke into her locker and stole her papers when she didn't let them copy her homework. But Erika remained unfazed and didn't let it bring her down. She kept being kind-hearted, hard-working, and full of integrity. However, she did date. She had boyfriends, but nothing too serious. Besides, she already had a man by her side all the time, her dad. Mitch was always with Erika, especially on the court, cheering her on, pushing her to be her best. But there was one thing he couldn't coach Erika to become, and he couldn't pay for it either. She couldn't be taller. That was what was stopping her from getting where she wanted to be. Erika only ended up getting a partial basketball scholarship to the University of Mary Washington. I had never even heard of the school, so I was curious why she even applied there and if she applied anywhere else. It just didn't seem like the best place for her to put her name on the map. Division 3 is the lowest level of competition in the NCAA. Division 3 schools tend to have the smallest athletic department and budget. So why there? Maybe because Mitch was hoping that being at a smaller school would help her stand out. While it turns out Erika may have been a star on her small-town courts, when she was playing college ball, she was maybe a little above average. She was now a very small fish in a big pond, still talented but not exalted as this outstanding player that she once was as a teen. In the fall of 1995, Erika was also moving out of the house for the very first time, and to Virginia, over 3.5 hours away from her parents. She wasn't under their watchful eye, so instead of focusing so much on basketball, Erika was enjoying other things that college life had to offer. The same things she used to turn down in high school: boys, partying, and drinking. Those were high on her list of things to do besides going to the beach. She loved being tan. She prided herself on being very well put together. All that hard work being the best at everything growing up left her with another gift: perfectionism. But soon it became a curse. It evolved to become obsessive-compulsive in nature. Every hair had to be in place, every outfit spotless. This extended to her surroundings as well. Everything had to be organized. They all had their places, and they had to be in those places every time she put them back. If not, she would be overwhelmed with anxiety. So being organized helped her cope with her OCD. A routine for her was to place things in the exact spot every time. When she came home, she would have a designated place for, let's say, her purse. She knew it would be there, so she wouldn't have to spend even a second looking for anything, because not knowing where something was gave her an enormous amount of anxiety. Perfectionism is probably also why she didn't have a steady boyfriend. No one seemed good enough for Erika to bring home to her family. Remember, she had very high standards for a man. Her parents had the ideal marriage. It was a lot of pressure. But as luck would have it, she met someone who she thought would make the cut. He was a handsome guy that she met at a bar one night in Fredericksburg, near campus. It was the spring of 1998. Erika was 20 and a junior, going into her senior year of college. In her freshman year, she made All-American point guard, and during her first 2 years, she was ranked as one of the nation's leading three-point shooters in her division. However, by the fall of her junior year, Erika, a history major, decided to quit playing basketball. Instead, she wanted to focus on her studies. Of course, when Erika quit, her parents were very disappointed, and maybe that's an understatement. Her dad had devoted so many years to supporting her, and he was still trying his best even now. Her goal was to go to law school. Another goal was to possibly land a date with a handsome guy at the bar. His name was Benjamin Sifrit. It wasn't just his looks that Erika liked, it was who he was and all of his accomplishments. He was 20 like her, tan, blue-eyed, and drove a decked-out orange 1972 Chevelle with black racing stripes. He was athletic, he excelled in swimming, yet he felt he wasn't good enough to compete at a higher level despite winning numerous awards and accolades. Sound familiar? A perfectionist, maybe? Instead of chasing his swimming dreams, he joined the Navy. He was born in Iowa, but his family moved to Texas, and he attended Cypress Fairbanks High School. That's where he was a competitive swimmer. He worked at the YMCA, giving swimming lessons. He worked as a lifeguard at one point, a grocery store, and even at a locksmith. Benjamin, who went by BJ, was born a few months before Erika on October 21, 1977. The son of Elizabeth and Craig, BJ had a younger sister as well. By his senior year, the discipline of military life appealed to him. He wanted to be a Marine at first, but after his recruiting test, he scored so high that his recruiter encouraged him to become a Navy SEAL. Out of the 135 members of the amateur SEAL team, only 17 graduated, and BJ was at the top of his class. He was designated as Honor Man, which is very rare. Most times, an honor man won't even meet another honor man in their entire life at random. But But BJ finished first out of his whole class, and he was the youngest Navy SEAL to receive the prestigious Honor Man title at the time. This training is considered to be the toughest in the world, pushing recruits to their limits both physically and mentally. On average, only 25% of candidates make it through what they refer to as Hell Week. It's a 16-mile per week running regimen, 2 miles a day for 3 days a week, and they have to do an 8-minute, 30-second pace. Week 4 increases this amount to 3 miles a day, and that's just running. After graduating from SEAL training, BJ was living in Virginia Beach. Erika was introduced to BJ, and right away she was smitten, very impressed with him. But he couldn't have cared less. There was only one thing on his mind, and it didn't include wasting his time on women. He was a SEAL. Well, Erika wasn't used to being rejected. She really wanted to see him again. She had actually just gone through a breakup, and it was really hard on her. There were times when she would just break down to her friends, even putting herself in physical harm because of the split. She didn't do well with rejection at all. It was sadly another aspect of her OCD. She had a really hard time dealing with abandonment. This may have also stemmed from her dad spending so much time on her. She expected nothing less from the men in her life that she called hers. BJ wasn't interested. However, as luck had it, later that year, in July, they bumped into each other again. Or maybe Erika planned it. BJ was at a SEAL party in Virginia Beach, and this time, she was doing all that she could to impress him, and it worked. They really clicked that night, and they remained in touch. Ultimately, they became officially boyfriend and girlfriend, spending every single day together. Erika knew that BJ was the one. Her parents always expected to plan this extravagant wedding when the right guy came around. She was a daddy's girl, after all, so Mitch planned on giving her a dream wedding. It was expected to be a large event filled with family and friends who loved Erika the most and would definitely want to be there to witness the matrimony. Erika knew just after a couple of weeks of being with BJ that she wanted to introduce him to her parents. The truth was, she and BJ might have been caught up in the honeymoon phase. They were already talking about getting married. However, Erika was keeping that very hush-hush. She didn't want to shock her parents too much with all of these sudden changes while she was still focusing on graduating from college. Cookie and Mitch were planning a little trip to New Jersey one weekend, and Erika thought this would be the perfect time to get everyone together. So she and BJ met them there. Erika was huge on documenting everything. Her camera was practically glued to her hand, like our phones are now. She loved scrapbooking. It had become more than a hobby for her. It was a lifestyle. Erika loved collecting things, and scrapbooking was perfect because it was like collecting moments in time to look at over and over again, reminiscing about the feelings and the things she experienced. She also loved collecting designer handbags and jewelry, diamonds in particular. Following in her mother Cookie's footsteps, she was the one that got her interested in all things sparkly from an early age. Cookie had entire glass cabinets with jewelry in them, like you would see at Zales, a jewelry store. Erika didn't deny it. She was materialistic. She told her friends, "I come from a wealthy family. I have rich parents, rich grandparents, and a rich aunt, so I was raised around it." It was normal to her. This trip was no exception when it came to documenting everything. She took tons of photos of her and BJ smiling happily and cuddling with one another. Eventually, she made an entire scrapbook dedicated to her new lover boy. Scrapbooking for Erika combined a few of her loves: collecting things, being creative, and traveling. Erika made it a point to explore. She loved traveling and making these scrapbooks for every place she went to visit, each one dedicated to a different destination. Just like other things in her life, this helped with anxiety. It was another way to channel her OCD by organizing her photos into books. BJ and Erika had a great time in New Jersey, but then they had to get back to reality. With BJ in Virginia Beach and Erika taking classes in Fredericksburg, they would be 2.5 hours apart, and it was too hard for them. Luckily, it was the summertime, so Erika relocated closer to where BJ lived. From there, it was a party every night. Being a SEAL meant BJ worked hard and played even harder. He had a reputation among his friends for out-drinking, outrunning, and outlasting them in anything he did. He was very competitive, One friend said BJ could go on a 2-day bender of drinking and partying and wake up the next morning, run a marathon with the Navy SEALs, and finish first. His tenacity and determination allowed him to excel in most situations, and those who knew him respected and admired him, especially Erika. BJ was the light of her life. Actually, her life revolved around BJ, and she wanted to keep him happy so that he wouldn't find someone else. Erika had a problem thinking that she was never good enough, most likely stemming from her upbringing. So even though she wasn't a party girl, she would be because she wanted to be by BJ's side, sometimes pulling all-nighters 7 days a week, running on little to no sleep. Even though having a serious relationship wasn't on BJ's list, when he and Erika got together, everything seemed way more exciting. She needed advice, so she turned to the first man in her life that she ever loved, her father. He would know what to do. She called him, letting him know that BJ was the one, the guy she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. He told her to essentially slow down, that being in love is very different than knowing someone well enough to like being with them. He suggested moving in together first to really get to know each other before leaping into such a serious commitment. But Erika said she was against that. She didn't believe in living with someone unless she was married. But being inseparable was really hard. BJ had to continue to relocate when he had different assignments. When you're a SEAL, you have confidential assignments. That meant that BJ couldn't tell Erika what he was doing or where he was doing it. With the next move looming over them, BJ apparently dared Erika to marry him one night, like, "I dare you to go to Vegas and marry me." They had only been dating for 3 weeks, and in the rush of excitement, Erika said yes. Within no time at all, they were jet-setting to the Silver Bell Wedding Chapel for their quickie nuptials. Officially husband and wife, Erika Grace became Erika Sifrit. They couldn't have been more in love or excited. Being his wife was thrilling. He was everything she dreamed of, and more. She brought him with her back home to Hollidaysburg soon after this, but they didn't tell her parents they were married. However, she did run into her high school friend Kristen, who used to play basketball with her, and she wouldn't stop beaming from ear to ear about her new man, bragging about being married on a dare after only knowing him for 3 weeks. Kristen was surprised. Sometimes you don't end up with the type of person that your friends imagined you would be dating when you were in high school. She was used to seeing Erika with the more nerdy, down-to-earth type. But tastes change, and so do people. It's been a while since high school. Kristen, of course, congratulated Erika, and Erika just kept flashing her wedding band in her face. She was shocked she wasn't invited to the wedding, and that's when Erika admitted that they had eloped. It just seemed really out of character for her. With 1 year left in school, Erika tried to busy herself while BJ was off on assignment after assignment. But it was hard. They were lovesick. BJ was homesick, and his dreams of being a Navy SEAL began to slide to the back burner, kind of how Erika's dreams had with her, but they both pressed on. From North Carolina, BJ was then sent to Arkansas in early 2000, and it was a lot for the newlyweds, especially because Erika had experienced BJ partying with his fellow SEALs. She was scared that he would be unfaithful when they were apart. They couldn't keep their hands off one another when they were together, so she began to get really anxious about what BJ was doing on his own. Any chance she got, Erika would meet up with BJ. This was very much against the rules, and they got caught. This was not good for BJ. He was cited for insubordination, the first of many times. The fact that Erika and BJ couldn't be apart was interfering with his being a SEAL, especially when he had to move to Alaska. Even though it was temporary, BJ had to depart for a 3-week cold weather training, and Erika had to take on the role of a single spouse. This time it was different, but he had to go. He was one of 6 men in the Naval Special Warfare Group detachment in Kodiak, Alaska. They were forbidden to even let anyone know where they were, but somehow Erika, I don't know, maybe he sent her a secret special message, because guess what? He was only gone 1 day, and she flew out to Alaska and met him at his doorstep. Of course, he let her stay in his room. Now, this was a risk for many reasons, but one of the biggest ones was because BJ was a field medic. In order to achieve this position, he had to take a 36-week-long program, plus continuing sessions every year. He also worked as an EMT in NYC and in an emergency room in Manhattan. He gained a lot of medical training. He knew how to manage casualties in combat situations. This meant BJ was in charge of medical devices and prescription drugs, ones like morphine, for example. Erika couldn't fly under the radar for long. They got caught, and it was a severe disregard for his role. He was swiftly reprimanded, but allowed to stay in the military. By August 18th, BJ decided to take a Chevelle for a spin right through the base and out the gate, speeding over 50 miles an hour. There were Marines manning that gate, and they were shocked because they could have been hit or even killed. This was beyond not being brotherly. It put people's lives in danger. When he got back, he was put in military jail, which is known as the brig. His mom, Elizabeth, got the news, and she could not hold it together. She had so many hopes and dreams for her son, and now he seemed to be just throwing it away for some girl he hardly knew. But to be fair, many parents want to control their children, even when they become adults. As kids, you don't always know what path you want to go down, so you hold tight to the ones your parents carved for you, only to sometimes realize it's not the one for you, and then it's too late. Elizabeth flew out to be by her son's side with a lawyer in tow. After all that, he still acted out of line. The same month, after being released, he just walked off base. His staff sergeant was like, "Where are you going?" And he basically told him, "Fuck you," and he left anyway. This was against military law. You can't just leave whenever you want. When other officers tried to stop him, he told them to fuck off as well. He had a total disregard for what was once his dream. Ultimately, his military career ended when he was court-martialed. By October 2000, he was dishonorably discharged and then sentenced to 3 months in military prison. Now he and Erika would have to be away from each other for an even longer period of time. Erika was distraught. She, of course, went to her parents and told them everything. They were certainly shocked when they found out that BJ was Erika's husband. It's not what they expected from their nearly perfect daughter. But they understood she was an adult. She could choose who she wanted to be with, and they wanted to be supportive. It was a lot to take in. She had worked so hard to graduate at the top of her class, and after all of BJ's hard work, he had nothing to show for it. However, he and Erika were determined to live on their own terms. Erika finished college. She graduated cum laude with a degree in history. After BJ was released, Erika's father wanted the couple to have a restart. He understood both of their challenges, and he always wanted to be that supportive dad. He decided to give them a 3-week trip to South America, to Chile, a getaway where they could regroup, bond, grow together as a couple, but most importantly, come up with a plan. It is nice that Erika's dad could afford to do this for them, and they did some soul-searching together, along with a lot of memory-making. It inspired them to come up with a business idea, opening a scrapbook supply store together. They would have their own business, something they could build with one another and be proud of. They also opened up an eBay store where they would sell things that were getting a lot of traction back then, and they brought these ideas to Mitch. He agreed to finance the scrapbooking business for the young couple. They just had to find the perfect location. They looked in many different cities, but ultimately they decided to open their store in Altoona, Pennsylvania, very close to where Erika's family was. Reason 1, well, like I said, be close to home. But 2, because they went around to all the other cities, there were already scrapbooking supply stores, but there wasn't one in Altoona. This meant they could kind of corner the market, so to speak, be this one-stop shop for all of your memory-making needs. It would be called Memory Lane, but they spelled it like Erika's middle name, Elaine, so E-L-A-I-N-E. Erika had a lot of experience. She knew what people were looking for. Mitch was able to land a contract for a space at this shopping plaza right here on the screen. Now it has a big lots as the main store, but here is where they opened their business. It opened in April of 2001. Erika and BJ moved into an apartment above a large garage in Altoona, where Mitch's company used to store their tools and equipment for contracting work. This was perfect. It was close to the scrapbook store, it was close to her parents, and they could live rent-free. So they were able to get a place of their own. That way, they didn't have to worry about finances, and they could focus on building their business. And it was a success. It wasn't long before the store was bringing in over 6 figures a year, and that was good for a new business. Erika and BJ were investing in merchandise and flipping it on eBay. I'm sure most of you know how it works, but back then, that was a big deal. You would go out, find something on sale, and then upsell it on eBay auctions. The more rare an item was, the more it would sell for. Erika stumbled upon the Golden Goose, Hooters apparel. It's true, the shirts that Hooters waitresses wear are not for purchase, and there are many that are considered rare. So of course they ended up being one of the best sellers on Erika and BJ's eBay store. Erika actually liked collecting them herself. That is where the Hooters obsession came into play for Erika, buying and trading tanks and shirts for her eBay store. They were really thriving at this point. They had a successful scrapbooking store, which was one of Erika's biggest loves of her life, besides her husband. They could work together as a couple, so they didn't have to be apart from one another. And they got to travel all over the country to visit different Hooters stores so they could get these coveted shirts to sell on their eBay store and then flip them for even more cash than they invested. And all of this helped fuel even more business opportunities for them. But I told you the story was about 2 couples coming together in a vacation town. The other couple has not been introduced yet, and that's where I'm about to go back in time again, this time to Iowa. On September 8, 1969, almost a decade before Erika and BJ were born, Joshua Edward Ford came into this world. His parents, Doris and Alvin Ford, already had 2 children, Melissa and Mark. Initially, they were living in Cedar Rapids until Joshua graduated from Kennedy High School in 1989, and the family relocated to Boston. It was quite a culture shock for the family, but they were close-knit. They shared a deep love for one another and an appreciation for their new city. Though transplants to this new place, it didn't take long for Joshua and his siblings to feel like true Bostonians. Throughout their life, Joshua and his brother were immersed in martial arts and fitness because their dad opened a karate gym once they were established in Boston. They would be at this gym multiple times a week, practicing with their dad. It was a big part of their life. Mark was also very significant. He influenced his brother to be as successful as possible. When Alvin opened his karate gym, he designed the logo himself. He was so proud of it. It was a red dragon with a yin-yang character. Alvin was so proud that he actually had it tattooed on his body. And then when his son Mark and then Joshua got old enough, they also got their dad's logo tattooed on their arms. This was very significant to them. Joshua was devoted to showing how proud he was of his father's karate studio, and he also wore a ring with a dragon carved into it. This was a token that commemorated both the karate studio that Joshua loved and his tattoo. He never removed this ring. It reminded him of what a significant part it played in his life. Every time Joshua glanced at that ring, he was reminded of all the memories he had made with his father. Austin was the perfect place for Joshua to grow up. He was really into sports, and Boston has a very vibrant sports culture. Joshua and his brother definitely enjoyed sports like everyone else, but a bit to the extreme, which is normal from where they were from in Boston. The brothers loved going to games, from the local teams to the major teams. They were passionate about sports, and that's how they bonded together. Joshua would attend as many games as possible to show his support for his beloved Celtics, Red Sox, Bruins, and Patriots, and the brothers would constantly be talking about the games, the scores, the players, everything. Growing up, Joshua had a longtime girlfriend that he met back in high school, and eventually the two got married in the early 90s. 6 years after graduating, Joshua and his wife gave birth to a baby boy that they named Zachary in 1994. Joshua's son was his world. It was like he was born to be this little boy's father. His world revolved around raising his son, dedicating time to teaching him, loving him, and being there for him as much as he could, which proved to be harder once Joshua decided that he and his wife were going to get a divorce. However, unlike some couples who despise their exes, this wasn't how Joshua and his ex-wife operated. Just because it didn't work out between them didn't mean that they didn't have love and respect for one another. They continued to be in each other's lives for their son, who was able to see both of them anytime he wanted. They had a very healthy co-parenting relationship. They were still a family as far as being loving towards one another was concerned, and making sure they were the best parents to their son. Joshua was determined to stay a significant part of his son's life. Zach grew up admiring his father immensely. They had a very close bond. Joshua was charismatic, he was loud, he was the life of the party, and people were drawn to him. The more they got to know him, the more they loved him. He was always trying to make people laugh and smile, and he would always lend a hand to those who needed it, even strangers. He did a lot for others, but he didn't have the desire to get too close to anyone in particular when it came to romantic relationships, especially after his divorce. He would date here and there, but he just wasn't interested in settling down. However, he was interested in getting to know new people and exploring different relationships. He just wouldn't stay with one woman too long. Commitment phobic, I guess, at the time, but that would change. It was 1999. Zachary was 5 years old. Joshua was working as a mortgage broker, and he was invited to a friend's Christmas party in Boston. That's where he met Martha Margene Crutchley, whom everyone called Jeannie. She was a beautiful blonde with bright blue eyes and a big smile. The two connected right away. One thing that was different about Jeannie was her age. She wasn't like the girls that Joshua was used to dating, considering she was 19 years and 1 week older than Joshua, born on September 1st, 1950, in Alexandria, Virginia. Joshua was 30 and Jeannie was 49 at the time, but it didn't deter them from getting to know one another. And it's a good thing, because they started to date, and Joshua's friends and family could see right away, even his son Zach, that he had never been happier. They connected like they were soulmates. They didn't connect like this with anyone they had met before. Jeannie was also so great with Joshua's son. Zach liked her a lot. He saw how happy she made his father. Jeannie was one of the nicest people. She was generous, kind, and perfect for his dad, and that's a big deal for a single parent. They hope their children like their partner and vice versa, because it's usually a deal breaker if your partner doesn't like your kid or your kid doesn't like your partner. Children can be the best judges of character. Sometimes it's like they have an ability to see past people's superficial charm and the things that adults can sometimes overlook. But Jeannie was perfect for Joshua. She was an intelligent, hard-working insurance executive who had been in the business for a very long time, and she was very serious about her job. Joshua was too. They made a great match. They were self-described workaholics, but they also liked to kick back and have some fun. They were serious about one another and their future, so when Joshua was offered a promotion that required him to move to Virginia, they didn't hesitate to take the opportunity. In April 2001, they moved to Fairfax, Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. Zach was sad because his dad was going to be over 7 hours away, and he was excited that his father would be close to such a historically significant part of the country. He could not wait to explore with him. Joshua made it a point to spend the summers and holidays with his son. The summer of 2001 was so much fun. They went sightseeing, and they went to baseball games. Zach was so happy. They had a blast. And Joshua made sure he gave him a lot of attention because he knew that they would be apart after the summer. But before the summer was over, tragedy struck the Ford family. Joshua's older brother, Mark, called with some very concerning news. Mark's 23-year-old daughter, Kelly Ford, was missing. Sadly, Kelly had been battling substance abuse. She was living in a project called COPE, a residential program providing substance abuse rehabilitation services to women. Kelly was a mom to a 4-year-old little girl named Summer. So despite her difficulties, she was determined to improve so that she could be part of her daughter's life. She worked hard to overcome her addiction. Her disappearance was heartbreaking for the entire family, especially her uncle Joshua. They were very close. Kelly was last seen at 1:30 p.m. on August 15, 2001. She had just passed a drug test and was on her way to a job interview. But apparently at 8:15 p.m. that evening, her mother Debbie received a phone call from COPE that Kelly had not returned from her job interview. Debbie was told it wasn't uncommon for people in recovery to run away, but she knew her daughter would never do that, even on her worst days, substance abuse or not. Debbie was worried. She was confused. She had no idea what could have happened to her daughter. She even hoped and prayed that Kelly would be found and that maybe she just had a relapse. She was praying for that because at least it meant her daughter was alive. Well, the search was on, and of course, the entire family was on edge, keeping up with every little detail in the case. There was nothing for weeks. No one could locate Kelly. This was Joshua's niece, and it took a toll on everyone. 2 months later, they got even more devastating news. 2 men were playing frisbee on Cape Cod, and they noticed something in the sand. It looked like a bone. They quickly jumped up, called the police, and a forensic pathologist came out there to observe. It was determined to be the body of a young woman. It looked as though this was a makeshift grave on the top of a small dune. Upon further examination, the pathologists determined the female died of homicidal violence. However, they could not identify who this woman was and needed to find out. They called nearly 100 police departments around Cape Cod, looking to see if there were any missing women who matched the description of their Jane Doe, but there were not. Unfortunately, the investigation ultimately led to the identification of Kelly Ford on October 30th, 2001. A police detective on Cape Cod called Debbie for a description of one of Kelly's tattoos, a Chinese character for love. Based on this description, the detective traveled from Cape Cod to Boston, where dental records reviewed by a medical examiner and jewelry that was recognized by her family positively identified her as 23-year-old mom, Kelly Ford. She had been murdered. It was unbelievable, and the killer was still out there. This was a gruesome murder. Her heart had been ripped from her chest, her head was missing, and they had no suspects. They thought this was probably a serial killer. So, by the spring of 2002, the case was still unsolved. The family had yet to experience any closure, and after such a tumultuous year of 2001, Jeannie and Joshua wanted to just give themselves a break. In May of 2002, Memorial Day was coming up. They knew they would have a longer weekend and a day off work, so they booked a room at the Atlantis condominiums in Ocean City, Maryland, for a quick little weekend getaway. They'd spend some time relaxing, and then they would be back home to work by Tuesday the 28th. They had to be, because Jeannie had a big meeting scheduled at 10 a.m. that day. So they would drive out Friday after work on the 24th, hang out until Monday night on the 27th, when the traffic died down, and then make the 3-hour trip back to Virginia. Also 3 hours away, BJ and Erika out in Altoona, Pennsylvania, where they were now living and working at their store, saw a fun opportunity to go on vacation for Memorial Day. Mitch wanted to treat them to something special for 2 reasons. One, for working as hard as they were. He was aware that they would be there all night and all day. Sometimes he would see BJ sleeping while they were stocking and cleaning the store. It was a lot, so he thought they could use a break. But the second reason was that they never got to go on a honeymoon. Mitch had a friend who owned a condo in Ocean City. Mitch's construction company had actually done some renovation work on it, so whenever he or his family wanted to get away, all they had to do was ask. So Mitch booked the couple a suite for a week at the Rainbow Condominiums in Ocean City. He, Key, and Cookie agreed to take care of the scrapbook store while the couple was away. In the 1970s, Ocean City had earned a reputation as a popular beach town with something for everyone. It was great for families, couples, and singles. There was plenty to do, from beach activities to boardwalk attractions. The locals and tourists of Ocean City loved it. They felt safe. I mean, there were occasional noise violations and disorderly conduct going on there, but for the most part, it was a great town. It was well maintained and a fun place to spend a day or weekend, especially on a holiday weekend like this. This area has a stretch of beach for 30 miles, a 3-mile boardwalk, and most people who come here that really want to experience everything the city has to offer would stay in a hotel or a condo on the beach. But on the other side is the bay, and both of them have awesome views. A lot of restaurants are actually on the bay side, just across Coastal Highway, but the boardwalk is on the beach side, so a lot of people prefer that side. Well, Joshua and Jeannie picked this condo right here at the Atlantis, and it was great. Located right on the beach, it's got a pool, it's close to all the restaurants and bars, and the room was more than what you would get in a hotel because it would accommodate a longer stay with a full kitchen, laundry, a living room, and a nice oceanside patio balcony. Now just a 4-minute drive away and a 6-minute walk, that was where BJ and Erika were staying at the Rainbow Condominiums. I have to say, this condo is definitely a step up. It's a little more luxurious because of course Mitch was able to get this for his daughter and his son-in-law because he knew the guy. It was on the 11th floor penthouse suite, 2 stories, beachside, with a big pool, a balcony patio a little bit more private, and a jacuzzi tub in the bathroom. Really nice place for a little getaway. And there's also a Hooters there. So of course BJ and Erika were planning on getting some exclusive merchandise and maybe trading some tanks from other locations so they can go back home and flip them on eBay. Erika grabbed a bunch of Hooter tanks that she already had on hand because she was hoping to get one from Ocean City since she didn't have one of those in her collection yet. So now you know that both couples are here in Ocean City. Joshua and Jeannie arrived on Friday, and BJ and Erika came Saturday, May 25th. Erika had just gotten her nails done that day, and by noon, they set off in their Jeep Cherokee. They stopped to get some beer and snacks before heading up to their penthouse suite 1101. Erika was eager to make her way down to Hooters. That was their first stop. They ordered a couple of pitchers of beer and had some of their famous hot wings. Erika did her typical routine. She was being nice to the waiter and then revealed that she had some shirts to trade. They also took a ton of pictures for Erika's scrapbook. They were having a lot of fun. Erika ends up asking the waitress where's the best place to go to hang out around here for drinks and dancing. The waitress was like, "Hands down, it's Secrets." Now this place is spelled S-E-A-C-R-E-T-S, like the sea, and it is the most popular destination in Ocean City. However, it's a 21-minute drive or over an hour walk. This beach is long, but Ocean City had set up a bus system and the locals and tourists referred to it as the drunk bus. It operated from 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. and then on demand from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. It would come by every 20 minutes at various stops on this trip, and there was a stop right in front of BJ and Erika's condo. It was perfect. It takes you to the most popular destinations and is only a couple of bucks, so it's cost-effective and safe for people who are out there drinking and don't want to drive. They decided to head back to their condo and then get ready for a night out. Meanwhile, Joshua and Jeannie had jumped into Jeannie's maroon Acura and made their drive to Ocean City. The first stop they made was to a grocery store in town. They wanted to fill their kitchen, stock up on snacks and food so that they could cook, and they didn't have to spend all their money on eating. They could indulge in other things that weekend, like the liquid diet perhaps. I mean, they were on vacation, they could do that. So they came back, unloaded the groceries, and then laid over the first night because they worked all day and had this long drive. But there was a Celtics game the next night on Saturday, so they planned on going to get some food and drinks at a sports bar and watch the game, then make their way out for some drinks and fun at a bar. 4 days later, on Tuesday, May 28th, the Fairfax Police Department gets a call from a worried co-worker of Jeannie's. She said she never showed up for that meeting that morning, and there were 25 people waiting on her. It was extremely out of character. Even when Jeannie was away, she was working. She was on top of it. She was on her computer making calls and even checking in with her employees. She never missed a meeting in over 20 years. But then the communication just stopped, and now she was nowhere to be found. They had already made contact with Jeannie and Joshua's family and friends to see if anyone had heard from them. Joshua was also missing from work on Tuesday, and Joshua's brother Mark said the last time he spoke to his brother was the evening of Saturday, May 25th. Joshua had called Mark after the Celtics game. Mark recalled it being really loud in the background, as though Joshua was out at a bar, and you couldn't hear him very well. So they exchanged some small talk about the game and how excited they were that the Celtics beat the Nets by 4 points. Mark asked Joshua how he and Jeannie were doing at the beach, and he said that they were having a great time. But Mark let him know, "Hey, I just completed an exhausting 12-hour shift. I'm tired. I gotta go. Call me tomorrow." That was the last time they connected. Mark just figured Joshua was enjoying his vacation, and he didn't want to bother him. No one had heard from Jeannie since that day either. She had checked in with her colleagues on Saturday here and there, but after that, it was silence. She wasn't returning anyone's calls, emails, nothing. Well, these were adults. If they chose not to keep in contact on vacation, so be it. It was up to them. So this wasn't a full-blown investigation yet, but after they didn't show up for 48 hours, Fairfax police decided to reach out to Ocean City Police Department on the morning of Wednesday, May 29th. As Fairfax Detective Mike Boone spoke with Ocean City officers, he asked if there were any missing people from Virginia that had been reported. After looking over files, he discovered there were not. Detective Boone let the OCPD know that a Virginia couple, 51-year-old Martha Crutchley and her 32-year-old boyfriend, Joshua Ford, had been staying at the Atlantis condominiums, and he provided the unit number. Before he hung up, he mentioned that Martha went by Jeannie, and he provided a description of her vehicle, a maroon Acura with a special custom license plate with her name on it. It just said G-E-N-E-Y, Jeannie. This would make it easier to spot among all the vehicles in Ocean City. Detective Scott Bernal was briefed on what was going on. He was actually just getting off from a graveyard shift that morning, but knowing that there was a couple missing at his beach town, he wanted to be part of the search right then and there. However, his supervisor ordered him to go home. They didn't have the budget to support his overtime. He told them he could pick up on the details at his next shift, but for the first time in his career, Detective Bernal disobeyed orders. There was just something that pulled him to start looking right then and there. He said it was a gut feeling. Now, since it was after Memorial Day, the crowds had died down to almost nothing. People had all headed back home. The front parking lot to the Atlantis condominiums was entirely empty, except in the far corner, where Bernal spotted a maroon Acura. He knew right away this was the car he was looking for, and you could tell it had been there for a while. There were leaves, sand, and debris under the tires, and dust all over it. He walked to the rear of the vehicle and confirmed that it was Jeannie's by the license plate. Now it was time to make his way up to the room and see if they had perhaps just decided to stay a little longer than expected, extending their vacation a few more days to have some fun in the sun. Detective Bernal was accompanied by OCPD officer Brian Brown, and they didn't even need to search for a warrant because, at this point, they were conducting more of a welfare check. A manager let them inside the unit, and right away, Bernal had a gut instinct that told him something wasn't right. First off, Joshua and Jeannie weren't inside. Secondly, it was like everything was frozen in time, as though they had just disappeared. Joshua and Jeannie's personal belongings were everywhere. One may assume they truly did just decide to stay longer. After all, these were not hotels. They were independently owned condos, so they didn't keep records of guests. That was up to the owner of each individual unit. It's kind of like an Airbnb. And considering this was now off-season, the owners would have most likely trusted that their vacation guests had left. And unless the unit was booked again soon, they probably wouldn't have housekeepers going in to clean. It had only been a couple of days at this point. They were doing a walkthrough in the kitchen. There were open potato chip bags on the kitchen counter, next to a grocery bag and an empty cooler that looked like it hadn't even been used yet. There were also a few wine bottles, some of them open, a couple of knives on a glass cutting board, a cigar cutter, a half-empty glass of wine sitting on the sink, and then there was another one inside the sink. That one was empty, along with a coffee cup and a couple of plates, a Tupperware container, and a few forks and knives. It looked as though they were just waiting to clean them, like Joshua and Jeannie had had a quick bite to eat, hung out, had a glass of wine or two, left, and figured they would just clean up later. There was an empty wine bottle in the trash, along with a chip bag and some paper towels. A receipt on the counter showed all of the groceries that were purchased, and it was dated for Friday, May 24th. Bernal looked in the fridge and in the cabinets, and he took note that most, if not all, of the items were still there. They hadn't been eaten. Bernal made his way to the dining area. You can see there's a table just past the kitchen. The chairs didn't even look like they had been pulled out and sat in. There were items on top of the table, so they quickly scanned that area. On the table, there was an open camera bag with a camera next to it, a CD holder that was open and unzipped just lying on the table. You can see some of the CDs inside. Next to the camera bag was a black sun visor, and in front of that was a Patriots ball cap. These items being there indicated to Bernal that the couple had most likely taken them off after being out during the day when they came back to the room. There was also an empty cup and what appeared to be a stack of work papers, folders, and a laptop computer at the end of this table. Moving into the living room area now, they see a black bag next to one of the chairs, and there's a snack bowl with some popcorn still left in it on the coffee table. This was in front of the couch, and there were also 2 wine glasses. They were half empty, with some playing cards and 2 stacks, as though 2 people were playing just before they left. There was a pair of men's loafers. They were untied, lying next to the couch in the living room, and an ashtray with a cigar and cigarette and a little bit of weed in there too. Moving on, they went to the outside balcony patio. There were a few chairs, a table, another snack bowl, an empty wine glass, an empty cup, and a few tubes and bottles of sunscreen, along with a fly swatter. Okay, on to the bedroom. The bed looked a little disheveled. The comforter was no longer on the top. The sheet was kind of hanging off like it had been pulled that way. You could kind of see the box spring underneath. The pillows seemed to be used. There was a head impression still on the top of one of them that was leaning on another one underneath, and there was a third pillow in the middle of the bed. Several magazines were at the side of the bed on the floor next to the side table, and there was an empty glass on that side table. A purse was located on top of the bed, along with a wallet. As Bernal appeared inside the open purse, right away he saw Martha's work badge with her name and picture on it. There's a pen laying nearby, a wallet that contained a number of credit cards, debit cards, paying cards, calling cards, and an ID with Martha's name on it from George Mason University. Inside the purse, they found a receipt dated the night of Saturday, May 25th, at 9:25 p.m. from the Green Turtle. It was for 2 draft beers, a soda, 1 8-ounce New York strip, 1 bowl of crab soup, and a large shrimp dinner, totaling $49.23. The closet had men's and women's clothing still hanging inside, but it appeared that 2 of the empty hangers may have had clothing on them before being taken off and worn, since those 2 hangers were in the middle of ones with items on them. Next to the foot of the bed was what appeared to be a bath mat, which was kind of odd. Near the window was a window blind. It had either fallen down or been taken off. You can see it right here, laying on the floor. In the bathroom, they found all of the couple's toiletries scattered on the bathroom counter. Toothpaste, a hairbrush, a men's razor, foundation, a comb, a couple of toothbrushes, and a blow dryer among all kinds of normal everyday items. Clearly, Joshua and Jeannie had planned to come back to the room. Now, something I picked up on, and maybe you did too, it seems like there are a lot of wine glasses and cups, considering that only Joshua and Jeannie were renting this room. I counted at least 4 wine glasses at all different levels of wine. Of course, they could have had several drinks, but usually you just refill your glass, not dirty another one. Bernal noticed this too, and it led him to believe that they may have had company over, and they were taken, or something worse. They immediately called the station and wanted to designate this room as an official crime scene. With only 2 receipts located in the room, one dated the 24th and the other the 25th, it appeared as though the couple hadn't been back after that date. They had Jeannie's car towed for analysis and to keep it in a secure place. When Bernal got back to his office, he made calls to all the local police departments, as well as ones in neighboring states of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. He was checking to see if anyone had been reported missing or if they were incarcerated. He also checked if there were any Jane or John Does that had been picked up, and none had. No Joshua and no Jeannie. Detective Bernal realized that because this is a vacation town, many people who were there when Joshua and Jeannie arrived were most likely already gone. So he was trying to work fast to get flyers printed out and passed out everywhere, up and down the boardwalk, at all the different bars and restaurants. They were hoping that someone may recognize them. They also wanted to head over to the Green Turtle bar and see if any of the servers remembered seeing this missing couple. Here's what the flyers looked like. They had both of their pictures on it, their height, weight, eye color, hair color, as well as a brief description of when they were last seen or spoken to. Bernal also checked their credit cards and bank records, as well as their cell phone records. There was no activity past Saturday night on the 25th. But so many people come here to do activities like boating and hiking, and they didn't know if somehow they went away on an excursion and got hurt. They could be anywhere. Bernal wanted to know if any emergency calls had come in on Saturday night, or maybe any time that weekend. He wanted a log of all of those 911 calls. That's when he was informed that one came in at 3:01 on Sunday morning, followed by an additional one not too long afterward. That call had ended abruptly. It was disconnected. So of course Bernal wants all the information on this call. He gets a transcript, and then he requests the audio. I'm just going to tell you what the audio revealed. So the operator had picked up and said, "Ocean City Police." The voice on the other end was that of a woman. She was speaking loudly. She was saying hello, and the officer replied, "Yes." That's when she heard some kind of clicking, and then the operator said, "Hello, hello, Ocean City Police." The woman on the other line said yes. Again confused, the operator said, "Ma'am, did you want the police?" She's now frustrated, wondering what this woman wants. She's not spitting it out, and she says, "Yes, I do." The operator started to ask where she wanted the police, but the woman interrupted her. She said, "Yes, I did, but I think someone is on the line right now listening." Then there was a pause. The woman did not sound very coherent, and they get a lot of drunk calls in this area. It didn't sound like there was an actual emergency going on at the time. The operator just kept saying, "Hello," and there was silence. Then all of a sudden, the woman said, "Do you have a direct line I can call you back at?" The 911 operator said, "Yeah," and she gave the woman a number to call. The woman said, "Okay, thanks," and she hung up. She didn't call the direct line, but about an hour or so later, another 911 call comes in, similar in nature. The operator picks up and says, "911, what's your emergency?" The woman is now whispering. She's like, "Yes, I have an emergency at my apartment," still sounding a little incoherent. The operator said, "What kind of emergency do you have?" The woman said, "There are people in my house that I don't know, and my purse is suddenly missing. I think I'm going to have a robbery here." Then she said, "There's an emergency here. Send somebody fast." The operator was trying to confirm by saying, "Okay, there are people in your apartment at this time." The woman repeated, "Yes." The operator told her that she was going to connect her with the police and to stay on the line, but then the woman said, "Hey," and interrupted her again. The operator said, "What?" And the woman said, "I'm in an upstairs bedroom. They don't know where I am." The operator told her, "Okay, I'm going to connect you to the police. You can tell them everything." There was a moment of silence, and then an officer came on the line. The woman said, "Hi," but then, as she began that sentence, the line just went dead. Detective Bernal is concerned. This was a woman saying that she was in trouble. She sounded intoxicated in the middle of the night and was apparently hiding from intruders. However, no officers were sent out there. For one, they didn't get a location from the woman. And while it may seem normal to trace calls, that's not exactly how these things happen. So, nothing came out of this call except concern. Now, days later, Bernal is trying to piece together what happened to Joshua and Jeannie. Could this have been Jeannie? Well, back home in Boston, Joshua's friends and family and ex-wife were worried sick. Joshua had not contacted Zach in days. He never went this long without calling him. With what happened to Joshua's niece Kelly being murdered and dismembered on a beach in Cape Cod, this whole situation seemed unreal. It brought back so many horrible memories and feelings from when Kelly was first reported missing, and they knew what the outcome was. The killer was still not found. Joshua's ex-wife was filled with worry and fear. She knew she was going to have to tell her son the news. She dreaded the conversation. She didn't know how it was going to impact him. When Zach came home from school that day, he noticed his mom and his stepdad crying at the kitchen table. His mom told him that his father had gone missing. Zach was only 8 years old. He was filled with confusion and fear. He didn't understand what was happening. It was so hard for a child to understand. He believed that his father was going to be okay. He just wanted to know, when am I going to see him again? His young mind could not comprehend the gravity of the situation. All he wanted was to be reunited with his father, and everyone was hoping that would happen soon. But it wasn't looking good. It was Thursday, May 30th. Almost a week had passed since Joshua and Jeannie set off on their getaway. Bernal and colleagues were heading out to the Green Turtle. The day manager told them they would need to speak to the night manager and the night staff because the couple was there at 9:25 p.m. on Saturday. However, they did have surveillance, and sure enough, it captured the couple. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at all. They were just enjoying some food and some beer, watching the Celtics game. So the investigators had to wait to speak with the night staff. Meanwhile, Bernal was informed of the gruesome murder of Joshua's niece, Kelly. Something seemed off. The connection was to two beach towns. They didn't know much about Joshua at this point, so they had to run every theory in their minds. They began to think that maybe Joshua had something to do with this. Just a summer before, his niece goes missing, and she's found dead. He's dating this much older woman. Was there a chance he was after her money, or did he just snap? I mean, they looked happy, but we all know looks don't mean much. Or could Jeannie be the culprit? Could she be conning this young guy somehow? Could there have been an accident of some kind? They had to look into everything, and one of those things was also Jeannie's ex-husband. He had been calling non-stop, asking all kinds of questions, and though it seemed helpful, it also seemed suspicious. They looked into him too, and at least they were able to rule him out as a suspect so they could move on in their search. The Criminal Investigation Division of the OCPD was working the case. They still had no leads. They went back to the Green Turtle when the night staff was there and asked around once again. Finally, one of the servers said she remembered the couple. She explained that they stood out because they were so polite. The server remembered them eating but could not say where they went or what they did after they paid their bill. As the detectives were canvassing the area around the Green Turtle, which was their one and only lead at this point, they noticed a bus stop. That was the drunk bus. They thought that maybe Joshua and Jeannie may have hopped on this bus after dinner, since they knew their car was in the same spot and hadn't moved back at the condo. After an extensive search of the transit logs for the evening of May 25th, detectives eventually located the bus driver, and he confirmed that he remembered the couple taking his bus that night. The bus driver echoed what the server had said. He remembered them because they were incredibly friendly and kind. They got on the bus near a stop at the Atlantis condos and sat in the front. They rode the bus for a few stops, and then he recalled they pulled up to another condo. A couple boarded the bus. They attempted to pay with a $20 bill, and the driver said, "Exact change only, sorry." The couple realized they did not have exact change, and unfortunately, the driver can't take anything but exact change because he can't give anything back. So the couple was looking around in his pocket and her purse while the other passengers who were already intoxicated were annoyed because these people were holding up the bus. Finally, the guy said, "I have a 5. And again, the driver said, "Exact change only." So the dude was waving the $5 bill and asking if anyone on the bus had change. Joshua spoke up. He asked the couple where they were headed, and they said, "Secrets." Joshua and Jeannie were too, so he stepped up and took care of the couple's fare. The guy looked at Joshua and said, "Thanks, man. I'll get you and your girl a drink when we get to the bar." That's all the driver remembered. He dropped a bunch of passengers off right in front of Secrets at night, and that was all he knew. This was good. It meant that detectives had another location that they could search and interview staff. So that's what they did. Staff members said they recalled seeing Jeannie and Joshua. They were with a few other people, including another couple, and they were hanging out. They were outside in line for about an hour, and then they made their way inside where they had drinks. No one had any idea what time they left or if anything out of the ordinary happened. But in just a few hours, they were going to get their biggest lead yet. After midnight on May 31st, OCPD officer Jason Hart got dispatched to a Hooters nearby. Apparently, a silent alarm had gone off, and he and his partner, Officer Freddie Howard, drove out to find out what was going on. It was after closing time on a Thursday night, now into the early morning on Friday. When they pulled up, They saw a bunch of merchandise sitting outside on benches right outside the restaurant near the entrance of their gift shop. It appeared they had pulled up in the middle of a robbery. They saw a man and a woman bringing clothing items out of the store. The man stopped, put his hands up in the air and said, "Okay, we stole it, but can we just put it all back?" Without responding at all, Howard grabbed the man's arms, put him in handcuffs, and then he started frisking him. He found a gun in his waistband, and it was loaded. He was also strapped, but there were no weapons inside the holster, just a couple of clips. Howard made the guy sit down on the curb, and then he went to the woman, who at this point was having some sort of medical emergency. She couldn't breathe and was sitting there with her hands above her head, gasping for breath. Howard grabbed hold of her and felt around to make sure she wasn't armed. That's when he found a knife, a type with a clip on the pocket or inside your waistband, so you can put it somewhere while it was clipped in place right in her waistband. Then he found a gun in the back of her waistband. It was actually shoved far down enough that it was hidden between her buttocks. She repeated with the man that they asked if they could just go and put all the stuff back. What? That is not how this works. Howard had her sit against a wall, and he could see she was having a really hard time keeping it together. She kept saying, "Officer, I need help. I need my medicine, please." When the officer has someone in their custody, they are responsible for what happens to them. Without medics on scene at the moment, he was doing all he could to try to remedy what looked like some kind of minor medical issue. So she instructed him to please go to her vehicle and get her purse. Her medications were inside. Howard told her to try to stay calm and went to look for her meds. I have to say, some officers have so much patience. As Howard made his way over there, he finds the woman's bag. He looks inside. He's looking for medicine, but he sees a wallet. He figures while he's at it, he's going to find out who this woman is. He opens it up and finds 2 driver's licenses inside, a man and a woman. He hands them over to the other officer. They run the names and realize there's a missing persons alert out for them. It's Martha Crutchley and Joshua Ford. They just stumbled upon these 2 supposedly missing people in the middle of robbing a store. They also had social security cards for the couple and a fitness club membership with Jeannie's photo on it. They look at the vehicle. There's black tape on the license plate. Maybe they really don't want to be found. As he analyzes the information on the report, he realizes the missing woman is 51 years old, and the person he's staring at, sitting against the wall, doesn't look a day over 30. So something is not adding up. Detective Bernal is called to the scene, obviously because this is his case. He immediately walks up to the woman in custody, reads her Miranda warnings, and then asks her, "How do you know Martha Crutchley and Joshua Ford?" She tells Bernal she has no idea what he's talking about. He further explains what he's referring to, the 2 IDs that were in your bag. Still, the woman just sits there like a deer in the headlights. Bernal shows her the missing persons flyer. She says she's never seen those people before. She doesn't have a clue how their IDs would end up in her bag because she knows she didn't put them there. But there's something else in her bag, something that concerns the officers even more than finding the IDs: spent shell casings. The woman explains she's just now learning how to use her new gun. Her husband had been showing her, and she kept the shell casings as a memory of the first time shooting. I don't know. There was a 3rd handgun found inside their vehicle in the center console. What in the world is going on here? What is their connection to the missing couple? Underneath the gun, detectives find a lock-picking kit as well as masks and gloves. They keep searching and find flex cuffs. These are like zip ties that are pre-formed into handcuffs. They take the tape off the license plate, run it in their system, and it doesn't take long before they know both names of the couple they have in custody. It's none other than 24-year-old newlyweds Erika and BJ Sifritz. What are they doing? They're not broke. Why would they be stealing from Hooters? You and I both know why. This was ideal for them. What's better than bribing waitresses to give you rare items and one-of-a-kind memorabilia? Stealing it, of course. They had clearly come prepared. Look at everything they removed already. There was a ton of hats. They even took a cigarette display with a bunch of packs of cigarettes. There were backpacks, sweatshirts, and Hooters vanity license plates. They put Erika and BJ in separate cop cars and bring them down to the OCPD for questioning. Meanwhile, they're rifling through the couple's Jeep, and that's when Bernal takes note of a parking pass in the front window. It's for the Rainbow condominiums. He thinks, oh my God, with all the items we just found, maybe Erika and BJ have held this couple hostage. So they immediately head over there, hoping that it's not too late and that they haven't been harmed, considering Erika has spent shell casings in her possessions, guns and knives. They have no idea what they're going to find. Bernal is able to get confirmation that Erika and BJ are indeed staying at the Rainbow condominiums and have been since Saturday the 25th, the same night that Joshua and Jeannie had last been seen. Bernal calls to get medical assistance to the scene in case they stumble upon the couple in distress. At first, the property manager would not allow Bernal inside without a search warrant. Understandable, but he explains the evidence they found in BJ and Erika's possession and that they have reason to believe Joshua and Jeannie are in danger, so they're allowed to enter under exigent circumstances. The penthouse suite is 2 stories. There's an upper and lower level. They make their way inside and nothing seems amiss. Detectives and officers spread out, looking for people who are alive. The fact that there were plastic handcuffs and masks in the Jeep led them to believe there was some kind of hostage situation going on. So they go room by room and aren't seeing any signs of Joshua and Jeannie. Since they don't have a full search warrant, they can't search anything. They can only look with their eyes. Here's what they observe. A very organized living room. Remember, we're talking about Erika here. She's got OCD. She likes things in a particular order, so everything looks normal. There's a paper towel roll on the coffee table in the living room. That's probably the only thing out of place. Then there are some items on a table behind the couch. It looks like a cologne bottle, some keys, and a pen. Nothing really stood out. They make their way up to the upstairs bedroom. The bed is completely made. Everything looks put away. They look out on the balcony. There's nothing there. There is an attached bathroom, so they peek inside and it looks clean. They step in, see the jacuzzi tub, and then spot their first clue that something may not be right. But is it a clue? A woman that has severe OCD, cleaning supplies right outside the bathroom door, paper towels. It looks like it could have been a 6-pack. There are 2 missing, and we know there's 1 downstairs, so maybe that's not too much of a concern. There are garbage bags, Clorox bleach, and a bunch of other cleaning supplies. They head back downstairs and are looking at the small kitchen area. They see an open laptop on the counter with a pad of paper and a pen next to it on one side. On the other side, it looks like purchase orders, some USPS packing tape. These appeared to be items that BJ and Erika would use to send out merchandise in connection to their eBay store. So it looks like they were working on vacation. Could it be possible that they didn't have anything to do with Joshua and Jeannie? Maybe Erika stole their IDs or got a hold of them somehow, but something's just not adding up. There's a glass dining table with some water bottles on it, some photos, a lighter, and an ashtray, more keys and a substance that looks like cocaine. There's also a random little note on the table. It says it's a to-do list. It says, stuff to do at the house, find jean shorts, hook up the cable, among other things that I can't see in this photo. Then one of the officers yells for Bernal to come quickly. He found something right underneath that glass table. There were 2 spent bullets. Upon closer inspection, they appeared to be covered in blood and flesh. This is what they look like when the officers look down through that glass table, and here they are up close. This is definitely enough for a full search warrant. One of these bullets looked like it had actually been taken out of someone's flesh. Meanwhile, BJ and Erika are booked for burglary, and all their personal belongings are confiscated. Those will be searched too, and it's clear to see that Erika's designer purse is full of what appears to be very expensive jewelry. We know that she's into collecting jewelry, just like her mom, and she's got a lot of it. But why would you be carrying thousands of dollars worth of jewelry on vacation? They collect all the items for further inspection. She is also wearing a necklace when she's arrested, so that's taken as well. Here are some items from Erika's purse. There was a camera, a watch, the spent shell casings that I mentioned before, some gift cards, a Blockbuster video card, a Gap credit card, an old Navy card, chapstick, some photos, and a folded-up little origami. She had this on her. It was full of pictures of her and BJ on trips to different places like Vegas, Virginia Beach, and Florida. If you look closely, there's a little shell. It actually contained a change purse inside with some pills. Now on to the full CSI search. They're looking for evidence in the Rainbow condo. Is there a connection between Erika, BJ, Joshua, and Jeannie? As they rummage through the furniture and the closets, they notice Erika had brought an abundance of items with her. In the corner of their unit, there was a stack of boxes filled with scrapbooking materials and other things used to make decorations. It looked like Erika had practically brought her entire house with her on vacation. She had meticulously documented every detail of her and BJ's relationship, from the mundane to the over-the-top. They find that Erika has actually brought a lot of items on this vacation, and they're in these big plastic storage containers, including the scrapbook from July 1999 through August 2001. It says Beach and Laney on the cover. They open it up, and it's full of pictures of previous trips that the couple has taken. One from June 2001 shows them together, and of course Erika is wearing a Hooters shirt. But look on the right. It says, "Everyone settles in, even Bonnie and Clyde," with a picture of her hugging BJ. Bonnie and Clyde, well, there's something to this, but at this point, seeing it makes Bernal question things even more. I can't forget to mention there were also pet pythons in a cooler in the bedroom. Yeah, we'll get to that. They wonder why they're coming up through people's toilets and stuff in other places where they're not supposed to be. Then they find a connection on the table behind the couch. Bernal picks up keys, and there's a rubber placard on it that says Atlantis. It's the condo building that Joshua and Jeannie were staying at. Finally, there's an actual connection, even though it doesn't have a unit number or anything. But there's more. A stack of pictures was on the dining table, and on top, there's a sheet of thumbnail pictures of each picture, usually used to go back and get more prints of the ones you like. Well, even though these pictures are small, Bernal is looking at them, and he thinks he sees one that could be Joshua and Jeannie. He picks up the next picture in the stack, and it's literally a picture of Joshua and Jeannie. These pictures are inside BJ and Erika's condo rental, and they're from Erika's camera. The other pictures in the stack tell the story of everything BJ and Erika did on their trip to Ocean City. There were pictures of them at Hooters, at the beach, playing mini-golf, all normal, so generic. And then this, a picture of the couple that's been missing for a week now. They did meet, they took pictures of them, and the cup, you can clearly see it's from Secrets. There's the logo. Not only that, look at this, another picture of Joshua and Jeannie, and this time it's on the balcony of their condo rental at Atlantis. Clearly they didn't take this photo of themselves. It was either Erika or BJ. So they were there with them back at their place. No wonder there were so many wine glasses there. Armed with this evidence, Bernal wants to try questioning his suspects. He runs a background check and finds out that BJ has quite an impressive resume. Navy SEAL, honor man. Coincidentally, though it's rare, Bernal had been in the Marines and he too was an honor man. He hadn't met another one in his career, especially sitting across from him, being questioned about a missing couple. He felt like maybe, just maybe, BJ would see him as an ally, a friend, a fellow comrade. He goes into the interview room. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. He introduces himself, and right off the bat, he lets BJ know that he's a fellow honor man. He's like, "You want to know what happened?" He said, "Ask my wife. I'm not saying another word. I want a lawyer." He refused to say anything else. This wasn't his first rodeo. This man had been in military prison. He had been through conditioning to the extreme, possibly torture scenarios that taught him to hold his tongue before betraying his country. So simple questioning like this? No match. He wasn't going to say a word. They just put him back in a cell and moved on to his wife. She was in the middle of a nervous breakdown, crying hysterically, saying she was going to die if she couldn't see her husband. She was kicking and acting crazy. But finally, Bernal was able to get her to relax long enough for her to ask him if he wanted to make a deal. She said, "I'll tell you about the missing couple if you drop the burglary charges." Well, that sounded like a plan, but Bernal was waiting for forensics to come back with more information on anything significant found at the Rainbow condominiums, so that he could use this as leverage against Erika. As the search was being carried out, it appeared that even though BJ and Erika were supposed to be on vacation, it looked like they were actually doing some remodeling of their unit. In the condo's main bathroom, you know, the one with the big nice tub, instead of relaxing in there, it looked to detectives as though drywall was being put up. There was spackle on the wall, and the bathroom was in pristine condition. It seemed strange to them. Why would a couple spend their vacation doing this task? They began to wonder if they were trying to hide something. Was there something in the bathroom that they wanted to conceal? Oh, there was! To the naked eye, the bathroom appeared to have nothing wrong with it, but as the technicians went down low and looked underneath the vanity, there was a literal blood mark on the underside, as though someone had been hiding underneath and clearly bleeding and put their hand on top. At that point, they were onto something, so they really started to look in that area. They pulled out the drawers, and sure enough, there was a drop of blood that had pooled between the back of the drawer. You can see it right here. So they fully removed the 2 drawers, and more blood. The baseboards have spray marks on them. It's a little hard to see against the black bottom section, but with certain lighting, you can see there's a lot of blood here. And if you look lower, it's in the cracks of the tile underneath the drawers, right in the grout, essentially dyeing it red. When they measure the side of the wall where they see this pooled blood, they can tell at one point it was an inch deep before it was cleaned up. The team was shocked by the sheer quantity of blood in this bathroom. It indicated that this crime was extreme. It was brutal. There was no doubt in their minds that something ominous had occurred in this bathroom. They took samples from the scene to be further investigated. They weren't done. They were now finding blood all over. There was evidence of blood inside the jacuzzi tub and the drain. After digging behind the freshly painted wall and drywall, the investigators found a bullet hole and a fragment. It went right through to the other side. You can see it right here. They dismantled the bathroom, ripped out the vanity, and found even more evidence and dried blood flowing through the cracks underneath the sink. There was a new door put on. When they took out the drain covers on the sink, they were covered in blood. While doing this, there was also a clump of hair, and when they went to pick it up, they found out it was attached to a piece of scalp. Unbelievable. The hot tub in this condo's bathroom overlooked the beach and had these 2 glass panes. They were covered with handprints. It looked like someone had been trapped inside and desperately banging on the glass for help. I can actually picture what could have happened in this bathroom. But why? Burnell wants to find out. So he does what BJ told him to do. He asked Erika, he's like, "Sure, we can come up with the deal. What happened? Why were you in Ocean City? Let's start there." Erika all of a sudden becomes very talkative. Immediately, she explains why she and her husband had been there. She said that since their work life was so hectic, they hadn't been able to enjoy a proper honeymoon. Fortunately, Erika's father had come to the rescue and set them up in the suite at the Rainbow condominiums. But what about Joshua and Jeannie? How did they fit into all of this? Bernal confronted Erika with Joshua and Jeannie's pictures that they found in her condo rental. At this point, she had no choice but to admit that she and BJ had met them. You may have guessed it, but remember the couple that boarded the drunk bus? The ones without the exact change? That was Erika and BJ. Joshua helped them that night. Erika told Bernal that they sat down next to them, introduced themselves and said, "Hi, I'm Erika with a K, and this is my husband BJ." And Jeannie said, "I'm Jeannie, and this is Joshua." They were headed to Secrets, where BJ had promised Joshua and Jeannie a drink for their generosity. The line outside was long. It took them over an hour to get in. Erika explained she was having very bad anxiety, and she takes Xanax to relax. She had some with her and had been taking more than usual while drinking. Once they were inside, they were having a great time, dancing and hanging out, until last call. They wanted to continue the party, so Erika suggested they all go back to their penthouse suite to take a dip in the hot tub and hang out. She said she didn't smoke, but BJ did, and Joshua had mentioned that he had some weed back at his condo. So the plan was to stop by Atlantis, so that Jeannie and Joshua could snag the weed and get their bathing suits before going back to Erika and BJ's. They left loaded onto the bus together and went up to Joshua and Jeannie's unit. They hung out for a bit while the couple gathered what they needed, drank some wine, and then got back on the bus once again to go to their suite. But Erika said something happened. You remember those 2 weird 911 calls? I'm telling you, this story is deep, it's twisted, and it's all over the place. Well, Erika explains that they arrived at their suite around 2:30 in the morning, and Jeannie and Joshua were so impressed, saying, "Wow, this place is so nice." Erika got some beers, and everyone was just checking out the place. Then BJ, Jeannie, and Joshua were sitting at the round glass table smoking some weed. Jeannie at one point wanted to get in her bikini, so Erika directed her over to the main bathroom upstairs to change. Erika said she was just doing her own thing because BJ and Joshua were still smoking. She was just tidying up, OCD and all that. As she started looking for her brown Hooters bag, you know how she gets when she can't find something. She gets major anxiety. When she was looking, she saw her red purse, her beloved favorite Coach purse. It was like a pet to her. She told Detective Bernal she loved Coach, said she was addicted to Coach, and that she even carried her pills in a little matching red Coach pouch inside the bigger red Coach purse. That's important. She goes on to explain that the purse wasn't in the spot where she knew she put it. It had been moved, and she freaked out. She knew if she hadn't touched it, and there were people there who were drunk, she was panicking. When she didn't see the smaller bag that she keeps inside with all of her valuables, including a $10,000 ring that her grandma had given to her, in addition to $7,000 worth of other items, she frantically tried to locate this bag. She said everyone was just laughing and hanging out, but she couldn't get past the fact that her things were missing. She starts searching the place. Her OCD is acting up, and she thought, I don't know this couple. They could clearly be conning us. Maybe they stole it. Jeannie left their site to go change. What if she had taken Erika's things? That's when Erika said she went upstairs and made the first 911 call. She had shown Jeannie all of her stuff earlier in the night, including 200 Xanax pills, and now they were all gone. It had to be her. She was convinced of it. So she made that call at 3:01 a.m. Erika explained that while she was on the phone, she heard someone pick up the other line. Remember her saying that? Like, oh, I think someone's listening. She was paranoid, so she asked the operator for a direct number and then hung up. That's when she said she heard footsteps, so she hid. I'm thinking, you have a literal Navy SEAL husband and weapons, why would you be hiding? Erika says that some time went by, and she called 911 again. We know that either she hung up or the line went dead before the officers could be requested. She explained that Joshua came upstairs, either to change or check on her, and he asked her if everything was okay. But then she claimed he started to flirt with her and even tried to kiss her. She kinda goes off saying, my stuff is missing, and Joshua was like, what do you mean? Erika says that she was angry and yelling, and that's when BJ heard. So BJ and Jeannie ran upstairs asking, what's going on? Erika tells the detective, I think BJ thought that Joshua was trying to pull some moves on me because he's like, what the f*** is going on? That's when she relayed what had happened. Her valuables were missing. BJ got right in Joshua's face, yelling at him, where's my wife's stuff? Erika explained that BJ was demanding that Joshua and Jeannie take off their clothes to prove that they weren't stashing the items somewhere. In fear, they did what they were told to do. They were trembling and upset. Jeannie was almost in tears. It was clear they didn't have anything on them. And then all of a sudden, Erika said the couple just ran into the bathroom and locked the door. Remember the handprints on the window? Perhaps this is when they were attempting to make a run for it. But BJ, now in a rage, wanted them out and kept pounding on the door to no avail. That's when BJ grabbed a gun and shot right through the door. Well, I guess that's why they had to remove it and replace it. Erika says BJ was aiming for the doorknob, but once the door was open, they realized that the bullet had accidentally hit Joshua in the arm. He was now in more of a frantic mode, holding it with a towel to stop the bleeding. Jeannie was terrified. She was screaming and hiding under the vanity. Erika said that BJ was just telling her to shut up, but she wouldn't. That's when Joshua asked BJ, why are you doing this? Out of nowhere, to Erika's surprise, BJ replied, "See you later, motherfucker," before shooting Joshua right in the head in front of his girlfriend. Jeannie was so fearful at this point. Erika recalled how terrified this poor woman was. She had just witnessed her boyfriend being executed right in front of her. Jeannie was trying to protect herself, even using her boyfriend's body as a shield, trying to squeeze further back as far as she could into the tiniest space, whimpering like a little baby. That's what Erika said. Erika was just frozen. She didn't know what to do. She said it was self-defense. At that point, she was rummaging through the clothing that this couple had just removed from their bodies and found that her purse wasn't there. She said she didn't actually know that Joshua was dead. It was all a blur. When she turned around and realized what had happened, she looked at BJ and said, "What the fuck did you do?" She got a glimpse into the bathroom and saw that Joshua was foaming at the mouth with blood. Erika said that at that point, she peed her pants. When BJ saw it, he started to make fun of her. All of a sudden, Erika tells detectives that BJ turned the gun on Jeannie and tried to shoot her, but he missed. That's the bullet that went through the wall. Then he walked up to her at point-blank range and shot her in the left shoulder. Erika said there was blood everywhere. It was on the walls, the tub, and all over the floors. Bernal was still listening, but he was thinking a .357 Magnum. That's where the bullets came from. That kind of gun wouldn't have caused such a huge amount of blood spatter, so he was already having doubts about this version of the story, but he continued to listen. Erika said that both she and BJ were pacing in and out of the bathroom, trying to think of what to do next. However, there was no sign of any blood outside that bathroom. There was light-colored carpet with no blood at all. At this point, she tells them she packed walkie-talkies and BJ took one of them while she took the other. He left to make sure that no cops had heard the gunshots, and she was looking for her items all over. She ended up finding them under the bed. Well, he knew this was a lie because he had pictures of the bed, and they also measured it. It was only like an inch from the floor. There's no way all of her items were underneath that bed. That's when she tells BJ over the walkie-talkie, "I found my purse." He comes back and tells her that the bodies are going to start smelling really bad, so they have to get rid of them fast. She said she didn't know what to do. BJ put a gun to her head and forced her to help him. Erika confessed to helping BJ dispose of Joshua and Jeannie's bodies in the most gruesome way. She said that they had to cut them into pieces, so they placed them in the jacuzzi tub, and they did exactly that, carefully separating their heads and limbs. At one point, she said that BJ was butt naked with blood all over him and had a huge hard-on that he was getting off on all this. Organs were floating in the bloody bathtub, and he even wanted to cook one of the legs. Detective Bernal couldn't believe what he was hearing and wanted to clarify if any human remains had been cooked. She said no, not that she knew of. She didn't eat or cook anything, but she wouldn't give a definite answer on her husband's actions. She said she was sent out to the store to get garbage bags, so she did. Then they started placing the parts in separate bags, but Joshua's torso wouldn't fit. So BJ told Erika to go get one of his military canvas bags, and that is where BJ placed the torso. They loaded the bags in the Jeep. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning, and Erika said she took a shower. Then they drove to a nearby dumpster and just threw the bodies in there. Erika admitted that both she and BJ hadn't slept in over 24 hours at this point, and she was in and out of sleep while BJ was driving around to dispose of the bags. The next day, they went to Home Depot and got all those supplies to fix everything and clean the bathroom. This is a lot for someone to take in. For someone who's so devoted to her husband, it's also very odd that she's just so easy to pin it all on him. But he was an abuser. He was okay with killing people with his bare hands. He was a big guy on drugs. Not to mention, when they were booking him, they took off his clothing to check his body and noted he had a very large tattoo of a swastika right on his chest. Yeah, I'm sure that can say a lot of things about him. But for one, Bernal definitely thought it leaned towards him having a very violent nature. This man was strapped when they found him and Erika robbing the Hooters. He was dishonorably discharged and spent time in prison. No doubt, he was dangerous. Erika, on the other hand, was barely 100 pounds. She was thin, tiny, bubbly, and flirtatious during the interview. Despite the gravity of the situation, she seemed to be in her own little world, not even taking it seriously. She appeared oblivious to the seriousness of what she just admitted to the detectives. She actually thanked them. She said she was so appreciative that they caught them stealing so that she could break free of BJ's control. It did seem like Erika had gotten caught up in a very toxic relationship, but what was more important was finding Jeannie and Joshua. So detectives went down to check the Rainbow condo dumpsters. They were hoping that they would find the remains so that they could have them DNA tested. Then they would have more confidence in Erika's story and also proof that they were indeed deceased. But they didn't find anything in those dumpsters, so they went back and asked Erika for more information. Which dumpster was it? She agreed to show them. It's the mid-morning of June 1st. By now they're driving over to a beach in Delaware. She points them to a dumpster and says, "That's the one." They search and there's no bodies. However, there is carpet, drywall, things like that, but no bodies. She has them on a wild goose chase. They drive to a few more dumpsters in the area and still nothing. So they start to think Erika is lying. How much is she lying about? They turn up the heat. They tell her, "We don't believe you, and if you don't cooperate, then we're gonna go ahead and charge you with murder." She's like, "Okay, I will tell you everything, but I need to have immunity." They want to find Jeannie and Joshua. They have no choice. They agree to give her immunity if she can tell them where the bodies are. She tells them that they took them to all these different dumpsters all throughout Delaware, Maryland, and beyond, and that BJ used to work for grocery stores. Grocery store dumpsters were better because they get picked up more frequently due to how much waste they have with all the food going bad. And they also smell, so no one would suspect anything. So they dumped them in grocery store dumpsters. When Erika returned to jail, she got her one phone call, and of course, she called her daddy. Cookie and Mitch were at Memory Lane scrapbooking store expecting Erika and BJ back that night. Actually, Erika told Cookie they were stopping by a reptile show and then heading back. When she saw the phone ring, she never expected to hear Erika screaming on the other end. Mitch was outside at the time. He heard her scream, turned around and realized it was his wife. He rushed back in and he's like, "What's wrong?" She couldn't speak. She just handed him the phone. Erika's on the other line saying, "Please get here as fast as you can." She explained that she had been booked for burglary. Mitch is in utter disbelief. The first thought he had was, BJ really messed up his daughter's life. As soon as he hung up, he hopped on a private jet and started calling lawyers on his way to Ocean City with his wife. He called around and was referred to a man named Arcangelo Tumani. The guy was highly recommended. Mitch had no idea what Erika was looking at as far as the charges were concerned, but it became crystal clear when the lawyer started to dig in. This was more than burglary. The news was already out that Erika and her husband were suspected to be the killers in the double murder and dismemberment of a missing vacationing couple, and that it happened at the Rainbow condominium, the place that Mitch's friend owned. Mitch knew this much to be true. He told the lawyer this was all because of BJ. He knew from the moment he met him that he was trouble. Prison was no place for his little girl, and he was going to do whatever it took to get her back home. Detectives contacted the sanitation department, telling them what was going on, wanting to figure out the garbage routes. Luckily, the waste management industry is very organized. They basically know all of the routes, where each dumpster goes, and which section of this huge landfill the trash would be located. The only thing is they need to know specifics on when the bodies were actually deposited into the receptacles. That matters in figuring out where they would be now in the landfill. This is a lot of work. It takes until the afternoon of June 3rd to narrow down where this trash would be. The landfill was about 45 minutes away, and if you had never smelled hot garbage, I don't know, just imagine the worst smell: vomit, rotten meat, dead animals. Now combine all of that with 100-degree weather, and you'd be close to what it was like at that landfill. Bernal arrived around 4:30. It was humid and rancid smelling. There were seagulls, rotten food, and bugs, hornets flying around, and it was vast. Look at it. These are the actual police photos. This place is massive. They had backhoes out there. They had detectives wearing protective gear, diligently sifting through mounds of rotting garbage. It was nasty. It smelled so bad that even cadaver dogs couldn't do their job because they couldn't tell the difference between a dead body and just garbage. But about an hour into the search, that's when they spot something. It looked like a leg. I am going to be blurring it here, but you can still see how it stands out among the trash. Once this was discovered, everything stood still. It was unbelievable. They knew that it must be Guinea or Joshua, and it intensified the search. But hours passed and they still hadn't found anything. Finally, they found a human arm, then another arm with a hand attached. When they gave it a closer look, they realized it had a tattoo on it. Yes, it was the karate logo. It was Joshua's arm. Later, they located the canvas duffel bag, 5 feet in length, and inside was Joshua's torso, wrapped up in blankets that came from the Rainbow condominium unit. It's obvious that they have found Joshua and Jeannie, or what's left of them, but they still had to officially confirm it with DNA analysis. So, the remains were sent for testing. They continued to search, but they could not go into a second day. It was unbearable. They had enough to know that they could charge BJ and Erika with murder. They wanted to continue. They really did. Bernal felt awful. He wondered if they kept going, would they find everything? He wanted to for Jeannie and Joshua's family's sake, but it wasn't possible. Joel Todd was the prosecuting attorney on the case. He was very experienced. He was knowledgeable, a veteran lawyer. On Monday, June 3rd, BJ and Erika were going to be at their first hearing in front of a judge. The search of the Rainbow condominium was still ongoing, and this case was about to really intensify. I know it already seems like we know exactly what happened. A domineering, evil, crazy ex-Navy SEAL in a drug-induced rage killed 2 people. But just wait, because it's worse. Here's the thing. BJ wasn't talking, Erika was. He had a court-appointed attorney. She had the best that her daddy could afford. Erika's attorney made a deal. If she was telling the truth, which they would confirm via polygraph, then she would not be held for the murders, only charged with gun possession and illegal disposal of bodies. But neither one of them was getting out on bond, that's for sure. Meanwhile, Mitch was working with the lawyer, trying to make sure that Erika didn't have to see the inside of a prison. It was decided by the prosecutor, after deals and circumstances were discussed, that BJ and Erika would be tried separately in 2 trials. Erika would testify against BJ in return for lesser charges. Now they had to build cases against them. This was a request by Joshua and Jeannie's family. Speaking of their families, they were beyond devastated. Poor little Zach. His mom didn't know how to tell him his father was never coming home. His mom and his stepdad sat him down and told him, "Your dad is gone." He was speechless. He walked out of the house, went to his little tire swing, and swung in the yard for hours, not saying a word. This poor family had lost 2 people in 2 years, both murdered and dismembered. No justice in either case. The autopsies were being conducted on the remains, and the pathologist discovered a bullet fragment still stuck inside Joshua's torso near the shoulder area. That was it. They determined he died as a result of homicide. Forensic evidence for Jeannie was scarce. They only had one of her legs. However, in order to classify it as homicide, the pathologist determined that her leg had been removed from her body, and the bleeding would not have stopped unless medical attention had been given. Therefore, she died as a result of homicide. Erika had not stopped talking since the arrest. She had given detectives a lot of information about her and BJ's relationship. She explained that once they got together, it was a constant party. He introduced her to drugs, to snorting her anxiety medications instead of just taking them the way they were prescribed. This was the beginning of what she said became a full-blown addiction. Her life just spiraled out of control because she wanted to appease her controlling husband. All of this, in the beginning, had to do with him cheating. It was when he had to live in Arkansas for a few weeks after they were married that she found emails on his computer going back and forth with some girl. It was October of 1999. This is what she said. It sent her into the deepest depression. She was obsessed with making sure BJ wasn't with another woman. She followed him, listened to his phone calls, snooped through all of his stuff, and finally, she even spoke to the woman herself, who confirmed it was true. She had slept with BJ. The woman was able to provide information that only someone would know if they had actually been with him. Erika said this caused her to go into clinical depression. She was taking Xanax and Valium, and then of course at some point BJ told her to snort it and to drink alcohol. After the cheating, Erika could not be away from BJ. She said she just didn't trust him, so she became obsessed about where he was going and what he was doing. That's why she would show up at his steel training. She knew that he had a violent nature, because at one point to stop her from doing this, BJ emailed the mistress and said, "Hey, you better tell my wife I never effed you, and if you don't call her and tell her that it was all a lie, I'll drive down to Arkansas and amputate your bastard kids with a butter knife. Then I'll board up the windows and doors and torture you." He signed it, "Your worst enemy, BJ." Erika also explained that she wanted to please BJ so that he wouldn't have reasons to cheat, so she went along with everything that turned him on. It wasn't sex anymore, it was getting in trouble. He would deliberately try to get cops to chase him. He had that souped-up car, and he would pull up and taunt officers going over 100 miles an hour. Erika said he even made her pee her pants once. That's what got him revved up for sex. Then they graduated to cocaine and ecstasy. She said they were doing it every night of the week. She told the detectives how he made her get an abortion after he tricked her. At first, he said, "I want to have kids," so they weren't being careful on purpose. Erika ends up getting pregnant. She's excited to tell him, and he says, "I don't want kids. You better remove it or I'll remove it with a coat hanger." She felt like she had no choice, and after she went through with it, he praised her, saying that having this procedure showed her loyalty. He was testing her. He warned her to get pregnant on purpose, just to see if she would get rid of the baby for him. Erika explains that she got a cross tattoo on her abdomen to remember the baby. He was also obsessed with Hitler, and the swastika tattoo was because he believed in everything Hitler stood for. He even named one of their snakes after him, and he liked snakes because they were the devil's creatures. The other snakes were named HIV and Bonnie and Clyde. Recall that picture, here they are, Bonnie and Clyde, settling in. She was referring to the snakes. She said that he was very racist. He would call her the N-word because of her hair. It was kinky and curly. He would also yell racist comments out the window at random people and threaten to shoot them, even saying that if he killed them, no one would miss them because essentially they weren't white. All of this is sick. He would also attack her weight. She was rare or thin because BJ apparently would call her a fat ass and tell her she was overweight. That fueled her need to constantly use drugs because it helped her stay thin. She was so into this addiction. Remember that South America trip that her dad funded? They picked Chile for a reason. They brought back a cooler full of pills. Xanax and Valium were only $90 for $1. To fund their habit, stealing was the best of both worlds. It would turn BJ on and pay for them to continue their sex, drugs, and partying. He was also a locksmith in the past and could pick any lock. So first, he began with breaking into ATMs. It started small, but then it escalated to different stores. Since it was making BJ happy, she went along with it. Then it was the threesomes. She explained that BJ insisted that in order to be the cool wife, she had to let him go to strip clubs and bring other girls into the bedroom. They had rules, she said. One of the reasons they started to go to Hooters was so that she could pick out girls for them. This evolved into selling merchandise on their eBay business, but then ultimately they began stealing Hooters clothes, and they hit up a number of these stores without getting caught. Then she found out that BJ had cheated on her again, and it was another downward spiral. She wanted his love and approval all the time. She felt like no one else would ever love her, and that's why she stayed. Things had gotten mundane lately before their trip to Ocean City. She persuaded her dad to get them a place so that she could get away. She said BJ didn't want to have sex with her for months. He needed a thrill, new places, new people, new Hooters to steal from. Then, about the killings, it was all BJ. Erika said she had no idea he was going to do that, but he became an animal after he cut them up. He held both of their heads in his hands and wanted Erika to take a picture of him. She said she saw him standing over this blood-filled tub, and she vomited. When a bullet fragment that was located inside Joshua's torso was tested, it matched Erika's .357 revolver. That gun was found on her when she was robbing the Hooters restaurant. This was the first of many clues that Erika may have had way more to do with Joshua and Jeannie's murder than she was letting on. BJ had his own weapons. Yes, he could have used her handgun in the spur of the moment, like Erika said, but there was more. They had collected so much evidence, and it was telling a very different story than Erika's. First of all, when they were going through all the photographs that had been taken, they put them in chronological order. As they looked closely, they realized that Joshua's dragon ring could clearly be seen in a photo on his finger from when Jeannie and he were at the Secrets bar. It was found among the jewelry that was collected and indexed. It was also analyzed for DNA, and it had Joshua's blood on that ring, still on the ring after it was taken from Erika's necklace. Erika was wearing this bloody ring around her neck when she was arrested. As they looked closer at the pictures in chronological order, they discovered a horrifying fact. Erika was wearing Joshua's blood-covered ring on her necklace after they were reported missing. This was a trophy to her. She was a collector, and she was donning a dead man's ring. Then there's the knife, the one that was found on her at Hooters. It tested positive for Jeannie and Joshua's DNA. There was still human tissue stuck on the serrated blade. It was her .357 handgun that was used in connection to this crime. She had an obsession with Hooters merchandise. It was her wearing Hooters shirts in almost every picture. But not only that, she documented everything in her and BJ's life since the day they got together, and she kept documenting everything. Even BJ's standing in front of Home Depot getting the supplies they were going to use to cover up their crime. She collected Jeannie and Joshua's IDs. She kept them as tokens to remember their crime spree. It was her purse that the couple supposedly stole that caused this whole situation to escalate. It seemed like more of a plan than unfortunate circumstances. But Erika was willing to take that polygraph, and she was going to testify against her husband. She just had to take the pre-polygraph interview, where they ask you a bunch of prepared questions to prepare you for the actual test. Well, they thought this was only going to be about an hour or so, since they had already gone over and agreed upon the questions. It took 4 hours. When the administrator came back out, she said she couldn't go forward with the test. Erika, apparently being afraid of getting caught in a lie, admitted she helped in the killings and even orchestrated them. Her lawyer was floored. Erika was extremely nervous. She was afraid and didn't want the truth to be revealed in this polygraph exam, so she changed her story again. And this went on. She changed her story several times. But during this interview, Erika relayed a chilling tale of what happened after BJ shot Jeannie. She said that he ordered her to make sure that Jeannie was dead, and without even checking for a pulse, Erika stabbed her and slit her throat. When she was recounting the event, Erika said she was shocked at how much pressure it took to pierce through Jeannie's skin. Then she admitted to stabbing Jeannie in the chest, all while she was trying to hide underneath that vanity. The deal was off the table. She and BJ would be tried for murder in separate trials. BJ's was first, in April 2003. Now that the deal was off, Erika wasn't going to be allowed to testify against her husband. BJ never talked. It was all Erika. He never admitted to a thing. As a matter of fact, all he ever said was, "If you want to know what happened, ask my wife." His public defender pinned it all on her. The prosecution had a difficult time making their case because there wasn't that much concrete evidence against BJ. It was all circumstantial. But there was a lot more direct evidence against Erika. The biggest shock was when BJ took the stand and spoke for the first time. His version of events was a lot different. Most importantly, he explained he didn't kill Jeannie and Joshua. His wife did. He said when they left Secrets, he decided he hadn't slept in a while. He was really tired and was going to take a nap while Erika and Joshua and Jeannie went back to the other condo to get their bikinis and the weed. Then they were going to bring it back over to the Rainbow condos. Well, he goes back alone as Erika heads over to the Atlantis, and he realizes when he gets to the door, he doesn't have the key. He's pissed. He's too tired to deal with it, so he goes into the Jeep and passes out. The next thing he knows, there's banging on the window, and it's his wife. He doesn't remember what time it was. At this point, she's just telling him, "We need to leave." She said they have a problem, and she needs his help. He said he is half asleep at this point, still coming off drugs and alcohol. She was saying all kinds of things, but it was clear to him that she had hurt someone. He followed her up to the condo and into the bathroom, and that is when he saw the two people that they had met earlier on the bus. He is a trained medic. He said his first instinct was to check their pulses, and he did. They were deceased, and he realized that his wife had done this. He's sitting on the bed with his head in his hands, not knowing what to do. He didn't know what happened. He didn't witness anything. He didn't know if she snapped, if there was a reason why all this happened, but he was loyal to his wife, and he knew that he had to help her. He admitted it was his idea to cut up and dispose of the bodies in different dumpsters. It wasn't his gun. He didn't collect or save any tokens like Erika did, and he never admitted to anything. The jury ends up clearing him on all charges against Joshua, but they can't rule out his involvement in Jeannie's death because no one knows how she died. He is convicted of second-degree murder and first-degree assault for Jeannie's death, sentenced to 38 years in prison with the possibility of parole. While Joshua's family was not okay with this, his brother Mark was interviewed by the press, almost in tears. He stated that there is no justice. They took away a good brother. But Erika's trial was next on June 3, 2003. In addition to her confession to stabbing Jeannie, there was a wealth of evidence that the state had to ensure a conviction in this double murder trial. Forensic evidence linked Erika to the crime scene, as well as the couple's stolen credit cards and the property she had in her possession. However, Erika attempted to convince the detectives that she was an abused spouse, but those that were close to Eric and BJ painted a much different picture of their marriage. According to those aware of the couple's relationship, Erika wasn't the victim. She was the aggressor. The pictures of Erika and BJ that they took in Ocean City before the murders of Joshua and Jeannie were of a happy couple enjoying their vacation. After the murders, they still took photos, same type of photos of them enjoying their vacation, like nothing happened. It didn't show her being scared. Actually, she appeared to be more relaxed, not living in fear of her husband at all. It depicted a woman who was content and happy to be on the beach with her husband. Then a witness came forward. Her name is Melissa Seeley. It was Tuesday in the middle of the night on May 28th, a few days after Joshua and Jeannie met up with Erika and BJ. Melissa looks at her phone because it keeps ringing, and she realizes she has 16 missed calls from her friend Todd. He is wasted, begging Melissa to please come meet him and his friends out in Ocean City. They got a flat tire and they need help. She's in Delaware 30 minutes away, but she agrees. She pulls up and sees the blue Jeep on a jack and she fixes the tire. She's introduced to BJ and Erika. Erika seemed completely out of it, but then all of a sudden she snapped out of that and said, "I'm so thankful. Can we buy you a drink?" But something about the way she looked seemed weird to Melissa. She's like, "You know what? I'd rather not." But the three of them, it was like 3 against 1, convinced Melissa to just have one drink. So they went to a nearby bar called Fishtails. There are pictures of Melissa and them at this bar. Melissa explained to the jury that she didn't want to take photos. They were complete strangers. But it was Erika who kept insisting that she have photos with her. Later on, Melissa wanted to leave again, and she was trying to, but Erika kept insisting they come back to their condo. She was making all sorts of excuses. "Can you please drive us? We don't want to drive drunk." She was just desperate and begging them. That's when Melissa hears BJ say something under his breath, something like, "I can't control my wife." He said something like, "I listened to her because she's got a gun and she'll kill a cop." Melissa wanted to get out of there. She's with these strangers that are totally out of their minds at this point, totally drunk and wasted on drugs. She doesn't know what's going on, but she agrees that she and Todd can follow them back to their condo to make sure they're there safely. It's only a few minutes away. When she gets there, BJ is banging on her window saying, "Please, please, you gotta help." Erika's passed out. I need help getting her up to the room. Really, she's like 100 pounds. She can't carry herself. Anyway, they get inside the penthouse, and it's like Erika snapped out of it. She's like, "Do you want a tour?" She's being all nice to Melissa. Of course, Melissa's pretty impressed by the building. Erika's bragging that her dad built it, and she's taking her on a tour while the guys were getting a beer. Listen to what happens next. All of a sudden, Erika is like, I want to show you this ring that my grandma gave me. Oh no, I can't find my purse. The same thing again. Melissa's like she was frantically looking around saying, I need it now, it's so important. Melissa jumped into action. She's trying to help, hoping the stranger will calm down. That's when she noticed the door to the bathroom wasn't on the hinges. It was leaning up against the door frame, and it looked like it had a bullet hole through it. So, she makes her way back to the living room. She wants to get out of there. That's when Erika starts insinuating that Melissa stole her purse. She's yelling to BJ saying, this lady is trying to run some con on us. She took all of our valuables, all of our drugs. I don't know this woman. Melissa's just sitting there insisting she did not take her purse. At this point, BJ pulls out a gun and says, I've already killed 2 people, and I'm not afraid to do it again. However, in the midst of all of this, BJ lifts up a couch cushion and there's Erika's purse. All of a sudden, she snaps out of it and is like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for finding my purse. Does this make sense now? It's a ruse. Erika was hiding her own purse. It's all coming together. Hide your purse, get your husband riled up, claim somebody stole it, and then kill people. There was so much more. Witness after witness ripped Erika apart. It didn't seem like she just had OCD. It was more like borderline personality disorder with psychosis, drug-induced as well. There were stories of how Erika could not accept rejection to the point where, remember her boyfriend that left her right before she met BJ? She was at a club and slammed her head into a brick wall repeatedly until it cracked open and was bleeding. It was for attention. Once she had BJ in her claws, she would not let him do anything. She controlled his every move, threatened to hurt herself if he didn't come home. It was her plan to get him kicked out of the military, constantly making a scene, barging into his meetings, finding out where he was at confidential assignments and ruining his career so that he would have no choice but to be with her 24/7. She didn't want him to get an honorable discharge because that would take too long. With every one of her threats, BJ got more and more caught in the middle. He wanted his career, but he also didn't want to walk in and find his wife sat on the floor because he wouldn't leave at that instant to be by her side. It was always something. Another Navy SEAL wife came forward, and she said that BJ was not a violent person. She was a former friend who knew him before Erika. Her husband was one of his SEAL buddies. She said BJ was shy, and Erika changed everything. She was obsessed with him. Erika told this woman not to look at BJ and never to talk to him. This was after a normal interaction with BJ, someone she had known for years, and then Erika just came into his life. One time, he was only 10 minutes late from coming home after hanging out with a friend. Erika stormed into this other Navy SEAL's apartment, screaming at him and his wife, throwing food on the floor, and saying, "Where is he?" They were like, "Calm the F down, he's about to pull up." She would constantly call his phone over and over again, 20 times back to back in the span of minutes. It was so much that he had to shut his phone off. This woman also confirmed that it was Erika's idea to get an abortion because she was doing so many drugs. She thought the child would turn out having issues, and her therapist even agreed. BJ's mom took the stand. She talked about how Erika pulled a gun on her when she was trying to come to her son's rescue when he was imprisoned in the military. She did that. She said her son was a changed person ever since Erika came into his life. There was so much evidence against this woman. So much evidence. For example, remember the glass windows near the hot tub I told you about? There were handprints on the inside. Well, there were handprints on the outside as well. Why is this important? Because they believe that with walkie-talkies, Erika was outside directing BJ to where Jeannie and Joshua were in the bathroom. She was his eyes. They did this, but it was BJ's testimony that sealed her fate. He told the same story that he told at his own trial, that he had nothing to do with the murders, but he went into way more detail this time. Here are some of the things that came out. He wasn't allowed to talk to anyone, not even his own family. They weren't allowed to have the color purple on anything in their house, anywhere, or on anything, because one of his ex-girlfriends loved the color purple. Erika wasn't skinny because he would force her not to eat. It was because she would refuse to eat if he wouldn't come home. She would literally starve herself until he came back. BJ also said that Erika stabbed Jeannie in the side, in the exact same place where Erika got a tattoo a couple of days after the killing, a tattoo to remember the murder, just like she got after the abortion. This time, it was a cobra. She also literally broke off a piece of the bathroom door and brought it with her to the hardware store and told a lady that was helping them, "This is all that's left of our door this weekend." She wanted to match the paint. They ended up getting an entirely new door, but she was bragging. She kept the IDs, the ring, and the shell casings, all to document her crimes. He told the jury that despite the smiling in the pictures he took with her, he wasn't a happy person. He knew what he did was wrong. He shouldn't have helped her dispose of the bodies. The prosecution made a point to say that the only reason Melissa and Todd were alive is because BJ wasn't passed out in the Jeep this time, that Erika was playing her same ruse, losing her purse, and BJ was the one that found it. If he wouldn't have been there, they don't know what would have happened. Erika probably would have killed them like she had done before. In closing, the prosecutor showed a slideshow of the pictures of Erika eating crab legs right after the murders, and the ring on her neck as a token of what she was proud of having done. A picture of her fixing the bathroom, going to Home Depot, documenting her little fantasy of being Bonnie and Clyde, the name she picked for her pythons. She was evil, calculated, controlling, and guilty. She was the mastermind, the puppet master. According to Erika's defense team, though, she only participated in the murders out of fear, as a woman under her husband's control. However, the physical evidence and Erika's own admissions contradicted this claim. The jury ultimately found Erika guilty on both counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Jeannie and Joshua. The judge sentenced her to life plus 20 years. 2 years after Erika and BJ were convicted, Eugene McCollum was arrested for several murders and was named the most likely suspect in the murder of Joshua's niece, Kelly. He was convicted of 2 murders and sentenced to life in prison. However, just like in BJ's case with Joshua, this murderer was never charged for Kelly's murder or any of the other countless ones he could have committed in his years of experience. The lead detective, Scott Bernal, had never encountered individuals as cruel as BJ and Erika. Even now, he still remembers the shock and disgust he felt when he was looking at that crime scene. The amount of violence and disregard for human life was too much to bear. I want to tell you something that's very important, but before I do, I want to say, to me, both of them did this. I think they were in a toxic relationship and they fed off each other, and they were on drugs. These people didn't even seem human. They were animals. But they knew what they were doing, and they wanted to do it. I truly believe that Erika was just a girl who got whatever she wanted, and when she didn't get it, she still got what she wanted, because she would force it to happen. Well, after all of this, I have some good news. Zachary Ford, Joshua's son, found life to be so difficult without his dad. He couldn't say his dad's name for years because it would instantly bring him to tears. He had a passion for sports and dreamed of becoming a professional athlete in Boston, but when his father was murdered, that changed. He decided to pursue a path of justice and honor instead. He wanted to become a criminal prosecutor so that he could make sure his father's death was not in vain. He wanted to ensure that those who commit such heinous crimes are brought to justice. In 2022, BJ was up for parole, but Zachary Ford was determined to keep him behind bars. It was the 20th anniversary of the murders of Joshua and Jeannie, and Zachary was going to make sure justice was served. He attended the parole hearing and did everything he could to make sure BJ remained behind bars, from testifying to speaking to the media. His efforts were successful, and BJ was denied parole. His next hearing is in 2030, but there's a chance he'll be released before then. Meanwhile, little Miss Erika will be eligible for parole next year. Zach still has his dad's dragon ring that Joshua used to wear, the same one he was wearing when he was murdered. It's a daily reminder that his life has been changed forever. He cherishes that ring, and whenever he needs a reminder of his father, he just holds on to it, and that keeps his memory alive. The tragic deaths of Joshua Ford and Jeannie Crutchley mark the end of 2 remarkable lives. Joshua helped anyone, regardless of their situation, and on that fateful night in May of 2002, Joshua saw a couple in need on that bus and decided to help them. Neither he nor Jeannie knew that these people had malicious intentions. Zachary even looks back on his wedding day with a heavy heart, knowing his father couldn't be present. It's difficult to bear that his father will never meet his children or grandchildren. He'll do everything in his power to ensure his father's legacy lives on. Life seems perfect. You fall in love, get married, and live a lavish life in San Diego, California. You feel safe at home, unaware that someone has been watching, patiently waiting to strike. It won't be revealed who they are until 40 years have passed. Today's case brings us to beautiful Southern California, specifically La Jolla, California. And it's not Lala, it's La Jolla. If you speak Spanish, let me know if it's true that it translates to the jewel. No one is quite sure who or what inspired the name, but the origin of the name La Jolla is disputed by residents and historians. Some believe that the city's name came from an Indian term, which meant hole in the mountains. Nevertheless, it's one of California's most popular beach destinations because it is just breathtaking. The oceanfront views. La Jolla is in San Diego, and it lives up to its nickname of the Jewel due to its natural beauty, its various activities, and its luxury lifestyle. Since 1900, La Jolla's population has increased significantly from its initial 350 residents. After the soldiers returned from World War II, many of them flocked to La Jolla with their families, and new houses had to be built quickly as the old horse trails were paved. Sprawling communities arose on the mountain slopes. Over 50,000 people lived in La Jolla by 1960, and there are currently over 40,000 residents living there today. It's still considered a very small, close-knit community. Today, La Jolla boasts over 200 sunny days, more than 100,000 merchants, and 101 restaurants. It's also home to nearly 300 seals and sea lions. The popularity of La Jolla as a seaside destination attracts wildlife enthusiasts, beachgoers, surfers, divers, and sea lovers. In 1978, CBS News 8 described La Jolla in an article highlighting the area as the good life. Although the town of La Jolla was praised for its coastline, shopping, and restaurants, only 1 year later, in 1979, it would be shaken by a brutal, senseless murder. Now that I've set the stage for where this case takes place, I'd like to introduce you to the Beckers, Michael and Barbara, and their two young sons, aged 9 and 7. Barbara Ruth Pepper was born on October 21, 1941, in Pennsylvania, where she met the man of her dreams who would become her husband, Michael Becker. Michael graduated with a master's degree from the Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania in 1965, and within a year, he completed his internship in internal medicine at Barnes Hospital at Washington University Medical Center in St. Louis, Missouri. Michael and Barbara moved to San Diego, California in 1970, where Michael worked as a rheumatology fellow at the University of California, San Diego, and at the VA hospital. Barbara and Michael had two sons, whom they loved very much. They were Barbara's world. Barbara was an upstanding member of her community. She was very active, athletic, and very pretty. She would attend local events, watch her sons' soccer games, and was fully dedicated to being a housewife and a stay-at-home mom to her boys. She was always running around doing errands, and anytime anyone saw her, they would see her with a smile on her face. She even played on a football team with other women from her husband's hospital where he worked. She loved life, especially her life, and she had a very good life. She and Michael lived in a very affluent neighborhood, kind of off the beaten path, and they were able to afford this home, which is now estimated at $4 million, because Michael Becker was a prominent UC San Diego medical professor and doctor. The neighborhood they lived in was close to UC San Diego and the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. I want you to take a look at this house. I don't know if it was different back when Michael and Barbara were living in it, but look at it now. It is big, with lots of windows. Who knows if these hedges were here before? I do know there were hedges, I just don't know if they were this tall, but it's got a big yard, it's on this nice corner lot with a lot of space, and it has a 2-car garage here on the left side and a couple of ways to access the home from the street. The neighborhood has a few dead ends, you can see them here. There are 3, and a major road leading into this is Torrey Pines Road. It is a very residential area, and the Becker's home is to the back, close to this dead end, also close to this big area out back full of nature, as far as the eye can see, until you get to the aquarium where all that underwater wildlife lives. See their house off Burrow Avenue and Glenwick Lane, right there on the corner? There are several homes right in front and around their house. Like most of us, the Beckers had a routine. Every weekday morning, the boys would take the bus to school, and every afternoon, they would take the bus home. Dr. Becker would go to work at the Veterans Hospital, and Barbara would run errands, carry out daily housework, meet with friends, make lunch for the boys, then prepare dinner when Michael came home, and the routine would repeat itself. They knew what to expect, except when things didn't go as planned. On Wednesday, March 21, 1979, the morning began as usual, with the boys heading off to school and Dr. Becker going to work at the VA hospital, which was only 5 minutes away from their home. Barbara stayed home, doing her normal everyday chores and housework. It was when Barbara's 2 young sons came home that the Becker family's normal routine was shattered. The boys returned from school at 1:30 in the afternoon. They usually entered the house through the side garage door, expecting it to be unlocked as usual so they could walk right in and be greeted by their mother. Except this time, the door was locked. They looked over and saw their mom's Volvo station wagon parked in the driveway, which usually meant she was home. It was unusual that the door would be locked. So, they decided to walk to the front door, hoping that Barbara had accidentally locked the side door but left the front door unlocked for them. After trying the knob on the front door, they were in luck. It was unlocked. The 2 boys entered the house, but it turned out it wasn't luck, it was absolute devastation. That afternoon, these poor little boys witnessed something that no one should ever have to see, a sight that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. They had expected their mother to greet them, but it was silent inside. Their normally active mother was not running towards them with open arms, asking about their day. Instead, as the boys entered the living room, they stumbled upon a gruesome discovery. They found their mother's body lying lifeless on the floor, with blood all around her. No one can be certain if these young boys knew exactly what they had just seen, but they knew enough to realize that something horrific had happened to their mother. They immediately ran out of the house, screaming for help. They banged on a neighbor's door until they got a response. Once the little boys calmed down enough, they were able to explain to the neighbor what they had found in their home. The neighbor called the San Diego Police Department, who sent out patrol officers, as they were the closest to the home at the time. Now, it can be frustrating to hear how this case played out because we're talking about the late 70s here. The way police departments handled murder cases was much different back then. And that's why I actually find these cases so interesting. It's fascinating to see how far techniques and technology have come. But these patrol officers who were first on the scene had gathered as much information as they could from dispatch and entered Barbara Becker's house on Glenwood Lane through that unlocked front door that her boys had entered. Their job was to make sure that this was not an active situation, that no perpetrator was inside the home, then secure this as a crime scene, setting up things like crime scene tape, things of that nature. The neighbor who called the police had actually gone inside Barbara's home. They wanted to understand what the boys had related to them. But once the patrol officers had arrived, everyone was out of the house. This is an example of the layout of the home. When you come through that front entryway, the living room was off to the left. The kitchen is right here to the right of that, followed by a family room and then the garage. To the right of the entryway was a long hallway. It consisted of a bedroom on the right of that hall, with a dining room on the left. As you move further down, there was a den on the left, a bathroom on the right, followed by a couple of bedrooms towards the end of the hall, including the master bedroom. Initially, when the officers saw the scene, they thought that Barbara had taken her own life, but after a closer inspection, it was apparent that someone else had done this to her. When I say done this, It wasn't exactly obvious what had happened. There was just a lot of blood. It was everywhere, and there were obvious signs of a struggle. They soon realized they needed to alert the homicide department. They knew they were going to need everything at that scene to be preserved. So they stopped, turned around, and waited for the homicide investigators to arrive. When this crime occurred, the San Diego Police Department only had 4 homicide investigators, but these men were diligent and they followed procedures to the T. Upon their arrival, they walked through this affluent Hoya home while observing the crime scene. All 4 investigators moved in a single file line. This was protocol back then. It may still be used today, I'm not sure, but walking in a single file line ensured that no evidence was touched that could later prove to be helpful to them. It meant less trampling over evidence or creating shoe impressions where there shouldn't be. Yes, there would be some contamination, it's inevitable, but they tried their very best to contain it to a very small area, as small as possible. This wasn't the day and age when they used shoe covers or high-tech PPE. It was just one foot in front of the other. Before they even came across Barbara's body, they could tell a struggle ensued by the fact that a small table was overturned and missing one of its legs. The house that Barbara kept was very organized and tidy, so when things were out of place, they definitely stood out. You can see the table right here, and it's definitely out of place. Investigators finally reached Barbara. She was lying on her back in the living room. She was close to a television that investigators determined should not have been on the floor, another sign that there was an altercation between her and the assailant. Even without seeing a weapon at this time, they knew that this was a stabbing death. It was apparent from the massive amount of blood underneath Barbara on the carpeted floor and from the wounds left on her body. As they got closer, it was even more heartbreaking. The sheer amount of violence that had to have happened here stunned these veteran officers. Barbara was fully clothed. Her clothing did not appear to be torn or ripped, and what that signified was that, at that point, they didn't believe that this was a sexually motivated crime. She did have visible stab wounds on various parts of her body, and investigators knew that Barbara fought hard for her life. She had a number of defensive wounds. So what happened? Who would have brutally stabbed a stay-at-home mom in a quiet, affluent suburban neighborhood? And not just stabbed, but slayed this woman? And I want to get into more of that during the review of the autopsy report. But at this moment, detectives were still conducting a walkthrough to document everything that they could see and photograph as much as possible. The crime scene would never look like this again. It's important to do a thorough walkthrough to make sure nothing is left out when it comes to documenting everything that they saw. I do have some pictures to show you of what the scene looked like, but let me explain what they were seeing first. Most notably, they saw a kitchen knife. It was about 10 feet away from Barbara's body. I feel like we don't see this as much anymore with the advances in technology. I think it's way less common for a killer to leave the murder weapon behind, and it appeared as if the person who did this was walking away with it and then decided to drop it as they walked out of the living room and away from Barbara's body. It was located on the carpet next to the sofa, and there was blood on both the handle and the blade. The thing is, there was a blood trail going into other areas of this home, and the investigators deduced that this trail could not have been made by Barbara. They don't think that the knife was still in the killer's hands, dripping blood onto the carpet as they walked away. So, this meant the killer must have been injured, and that it was their blood being left behind. Cutting oneself in the commission of a stabbing is very common. Blood is slippery, and with the force necessary to make such impactful wounds, many times the killer loses grip and the knife slips, and they cut themselves, especially when they use something like a kitchen knife with a sleek handle with no traction. They most were not wearing gloves for that extra grip either. From where they're standing, investigators can see a trail of blood leading from the living room to the left into the kitchen. There are blood droplets on the floor, and there are also smears on the countertops and other areas all over the kitchen. They also noted that the dishwasher was wide open. You can see it here. This may have been where the knife was retrieved, Or Barbara may have been possibly getting ready to unload it when the attacker came inside. It definitely appeared that the attacker was trying to stop their blood and maybe wrap up their injured arm or hand. There was a bloody towel on the kitchen table, and in the sink there was a wet bloody paper towel that was thrown on a cooking pot. There were blood smears all over the sink area as well. The trail continued into the bathroom, which was down the hall adjacent to the kitchen. Even more blood droplets were found on the floor in there, as well as bloody toilet paper on the floor. They were most likely trying to stop the bleeding before this person fled. There was bloody toilet paper in the toilet as well, which was unflushed, and blood covering the sink. Every bloody tissue and paper towel investigators believe the suspect touched was preserved and saved as evidence, but it wasn't processed or analyzed the same way it would be today, which is very interesting to me. With these older cases, it was so much harder to figure out who committed a crime like this unless you had an eyewitness. It's fascinating to me that the blood was collected to conduct a blood test, and I'm talking about the ones you get at a doctor's office to determine what blood type you are. I was in awe over this, and this was the biggest lead you could get when it came to blood evidence, or DNA, if you will. I have more to say about this, but there was no way for them to match DNA to an actual person back then. It was only to determine the blood type, so that if and when they did get a potential suspect, they could take that person's blood and then rule them out if they didn't have the same blood type. That's not really that great when it comes to pinpointing the actual perpetrator, but it's what they had at the time. After the detectives walked the scene and observed each room and documented their findings, they reconvened to talk about potential motives. One thing they agreed on was that because of the amount of blood at the crime scene and the number of wounds on Barbara, the person who did this wanted to ensure that she was dead. That was the goal before they left the house. But why? Well, there were theories. They believed the suspect, ECT, was a male, and even narrowed it down to a white male, just because of the statistics they had at the time. This was one, possibly a burglar gone wrong. Maybe someone cased the neighborhood. They knew everyone's schedule. They knew Barbara was going to be alone during the work days, and that the kids were at school. So they thought this was the perfect opportunity to strike, but maybe they weren't aware of how strong and fierce Barbara would be. She's 37 years old and active, and it might have caught him off guard when she fought back. He met her with a fight, and it escalated until he grabbed a knife and ended Barbara's life. Or two, it could be that someone was stalking Barbara instead of casing the house to commit a robbery. Perhaps it was Barbara that they were after. They could have snuck in from the open side door that the boys usually used, grabbed a knife, threatened Barbara with it, and as they tried to force themselves on her, she resisted. That's what made this assailant fight back, and ultimately, he cornered her in that living room, where he ended up ending her life. The third theory was that this was just a very deranged person, full of rage, who was on some kind of killing frenzy. They were just out for blood, and Barbara was an easy target because she was a female alone in her home with an unlocked door. Regardless of the theories, they had limited time. They needed to get moving. Back in those days, the first 24 to 48 hours were even more important than they are now. Their evidence could be walking away, and someone could have seen something, and they might lose the opportunity to talk to them. With only 4 detectives on this case, they divided the workload. Each one of them had their own duties. One would be responsible for taking notes and photos and working more with the crime scene. Another would canvass the neighborhood. Another would notify and interview family and friends. And the last of the 4 would correspond with headquarters. But they would all work together and reconvene at the end of the day to share information. It's just so crazy to think that there were no cell phones back then, that nobody could have caught the assailant on video. Even video surveillance, I don't know if it was slim to none. I mean, there weren't Ring cameras. There weren't doors that officers could go to and say, "Hey, can we see the footage from today?" That just didn't exist. Their best bet was that someone saw something out of the ordinary and would remember seeing it. But I will say, back then, People didn't have as many distractions, like scrolling social media all day, for example. So they did have more time and an opportunity to have their eyes open and see something. At this point, investigators can't rule out any possibilities. They have to follow each tip and each lead carefully to see where they lead them. The San Diego Police Department had one of the highest murder solve rates in the nation in 1979. So they assumed that Barbara's murder would be another easy slam dunk for them. Back then, like I said, that first 48 hours was even more critical. During the first 2 days following a crime, investigators worked on nothing but that case for 2 days straight. Sometimes they wouldn't even sleep. The more information an investigator can gather after a murder, the better chance they have of catching their suspect, because eyewitness statements will be fresh in their minds. No matter how low the police department's resources were, homicide investigations were taken very seriously. One terrifying aspect of this case is that the killer was on the loose. There could be a serial killer about to take their next victim. Investigators knew that once they began to canvass this neighborhood, all of the residents would be aware that a murder took place, and word would travel fast. This would inject fear into the community and put more pressure on the already taxed law enforcement agency. The detective tasked with conducting the canvass went door to door, asking anyone if they heard anything, if they saw anything out of the ordinary in the day or the days leading up to the murder. Investigators were kind of intrigued by the fact that the murderer would have chosen this area. It was tranquil. It was off the main roads, not easily accessible for through traffic. There had to be intent to drive into this area. It wasn't like you would accidentally find yourself lost within it. The only people who would normally be walking around or driving down these streets were the residents. The typical crime in this area was usually petty burglary or a drunk driver. Nothing had been as horrific or brutal as what happened to Barbara Becker. Not that anyone working this case could recall anyway. All the residents were stunned. It did not seem real. The detective was getting more questions than answers because everyone he talked to wanted to know what happened. Investigators contacted every single neighbor on every street in that neighborhood and received just a few tips that seemed even remotely promising. One witness told investigators they saw a person who looked like a housekeeper, and she was visiting several houses in the area. Another neighbor reported seeing landscapers that were cutting Barbara's bushes in the days before her death, along with a crew of workers. So a number of people were there. These were both really good leads. Perhaps this woman that they saw going door to door was casing the neighborhood, or maybe someone who was cutting the grass at Barbara's became obsessed with her. Next, they had to track down these individuals for questioning. Meanwhile, another detective's job was to notify Barbara's family, but he also sought out to interview anyone close to her because most violent crimes, especially ones like this, are committed by someone the victim knew, someone close to them, someone with a reason to harm them. The first call they made was to Barbara's husband. He was at work when they called him, and he was made aware of what was going on by default. He's also their #1 suspect right now. When they informed him of what occurred, his emotions were raw. He wanted to know how it happened. He actually hung up on them and raced home to be with his wife. However, when he arrived on the scene, he was met by the detectives, and he cooperated. They asked him about everything he did that day, starting from that morning. Dr. Michael Becker told investigators that he left his house somewhere around 8:20 in the morning to drive one of his sons to school. They both usually rode their bikes together, but that morning, Michael took one of them himself before heading into work at the hospital. Kind of peculiar, but okay. He said after he dropped off his son at school, he headed back to the hospital to work, and he was there all day long until their call. He's actually the head of one of the entire departments at the hospital, so it was going to be pretty easy to verify his alibi if it were true. He also told them that Barbara had told him she had a hair appointment at 10 o'clock that morning. At that point, the detectives had to get personal with Michael. One of the biggest reasons that someone's wife is killed is usually because of a domestic issue. So, even though this is an upstanding doctor in the community, detectives want to know, and they ask point blank whether Michael or his wife were sleeping with other people or if they were in an unhappy marriage. He says no. He said he and Barbara were very happy, there were no issues in their marriage, and he had nothing to do with this. He was devastated. He was shocked by this news, and it was obvious to investigators. They do use their gut feelings to gauge whether or not someone's guilty or innocent, but it felt like when they were trying to gauge his reaction that he was innocent. They believed him. They still had to check his alibi. After all, he was only a short drive away. There wasn't GPS tracking on a cell phone to know his exact movements. He could have dropped his son off, gone back to the house, killed his wife, and then gone to work all day. Or could he have left work sometime during the day? Anything is possible. Investigators went into the hospital and talked to his colleagues, and they were able to confirm Michael's story. He was at work by 9 o'clock, and he was seeing patients back to back all day. He was never seen leaving the hospital at any time. Furthermore, none of his colleagues said that they ever witnessed anything that would make them believe that there were any marital issues in regard to the Beckers. The crime scene was still being processed, and the leads from the neighborhood canvass were being followed up on. Meanwhile, the autopsy report was completed immediately following the investigators' thorough inspection of the house. The coroner arrived to preserve Barbara's body before she was transferred to the medical examiner's office. The coroner covered Barbara's hands and feet with plastic bags to save fibers or skin from under her fingernails. This is crucial when someone fights back. Even if it's not apparent visually speaking, there could be evidence that cannot be seen with the naked eye underneath the fingernails. They don't want any of that to fall off, so the hands are securely bagged for transport. The medical examiner performed an autopsy on Barbara's body just a day after her murder. One of the 4 investigators from the San Diego Police Department was there to observe this entire examination. He was taking notes and photographs of her entire body. During Barbara's autopsy, horrific details were revealed. The medical examiner identified 8 stab wounds to Barbara's throat. Her murderer attempted to use the dull kitchen knife as a saw. There were 7 back-and-forth strokes on her neck that reached her backbone, and that's heartbreaking. Barbara also had wounds on the sides of her head, which were so deep that her skull was showing, and some of the most horrific injuries were actually on her hands and fingers. They were sliced to the bone as her murderer was swiping that knife at her. Barbara was trying to shield herself, but to no avail. She was no match for that blade. Barbara's cause of death was determined to be what is known as exsanguination, extreme blood loss. Consequently, the manner of death was classified as homicide, which is pretty obvious to all of us, but they have to make these findings official. As those 48 hours were coming to a close, the crime scene was still being scoured. Investigators also tracked down the men who were working on Barbara's home, trimming her hedges, and all of them cooperated with investigators and were cleared of any suspicion. They also confirmed that the woman seen going door to door was a housekeeper for a family in La Hoya, and her husband routinely drove her to work and dropped her off, so they were both cleared as well. Now, back at the crime scene during this time, investigators were not collecting blood evidence and DNA evidence because they would use it to detect the suspect. That was way off. That was a long time from happening. Instead, the investigators and law enforcement officers would focus on fibers, fingerprints, and hair evidence, and the blood, like I said, would be collected to type the blood. Laboratory technicians analyzed all the blood stains and the clothing that Barbara wore for any hairs, fibers, or trace evidence collected by investigators at this crime scene. As much evidence as possible was collected and preserved in case a suspect appeared, so that one day they could match it to him. But without another set of fingerprints, you can't match fingerprints. Without a person's blood type, you can't match the blood type. And without a person's hair, you can't match the hair. So all of this is pretty useless at this point. They still had to preserve it. Even though they had the killer's blood in 1979, they couldn't do much with it. The lack of DNA testing at the time made typing the blood the only option. Forensic blood typing works as follows. If the blood at the crime scene is type A, then anyone with, let's say, type O negative, like me, would be excluded as a suspect. If the blood found at the crime scene was type O negative, then anyone with that blood would be a suspect. But that would mean 40% of the population. Although it wasn't as good as DNA testing, it was all these investigators had at the time. I can't even imagine because it sounds so silly now that we know the capabilities we have now. Even though the process could strongly link a suspect to the crime, it couldn't prove guilt. In most cases, the method was used by law enforcement to eliminate suspects from a crime instead of pinpointing them, because that would be obvious. Like I said, if the blood type was A and you are type O negative, you're probably not the killer, right? You're not the killer. In an article published by the Los Angeles Times in May of 1979, the San Diego Police Department expressed their confusion over the decrease in domestic homicides. So instead of a husband killing a wife, something else was happening. Before 1979, there were many crimes of passion, and law enforcement would respond to these areas. There were partners killing each other, and when they arrived, there was pretty much a smoking gun, literally. It was easy for law enforcement to solve these types of crimes, because there you had it, the husband with a knife in his hand, the husband with a gun in his hand. But starting in 1979, these cases were getting even more complex, and they only got worse with time. Most of their unsolved cases, like that of Barbara Becker's murder, were crimes committed by a stranger, which made them difficult to resolve. Only one murder committed between January and May of 1979 was classified as a crime of passion. They also reported increased sexual-related crimes and robberies against women that escalated to murder. What was going on back then? I'm not sure, but the residents of La Jolla were terrified that a serial killer might be roaming their community. California was a hot spot for serial killers around the 1970s. Serial killers roaming the Golden State in the 1970s included the following, and some of these will be familiar to you. This will be a little bit of serial killer trivia, if you will. Angelo Buono and his adopted cousin Kenneth Bianchi were known as the Hillside Stranglers, and I hope I'm saying those names right. I'm probably not. They were convicted of killing 10 young women in Los Angeles between October 1977 and February 1978. I'm going to just put all of their names up on the screen. This is just so heartbreaking. They were between the ages of 15 and 28 years old. The two men would persuade their victims that they were undercover cops and then order them to get inside their Cadillac, which they claimed was an unmarked police car. Then they would drive them home, torture them, and murder them. Next on the list is Ed Kemper. You've probably heard of him before. His nickname is the Co-Ed Killer. He is so scary. He murdered a total of 10 people, including a 15-year-old girl as well as his own mother and her best friend, from May 1972 to April 1973. This was following his parole for murdering his paternal grandparents. Yes, he was only 15. He was sitting at the kitchen table when he got into a fight with his grandma, as children usually do with their elders. But little Ed was not normal. He ran off and got a rifle that he was supposed to be using for hunting, but he had been using it to shoot small animals in the neighborhood, so it was taken away from him. He knew where it was, and he got it. He stormed into that kitchen, pointed it at his nan, and pulled the trigger. That's just so heartbreaking. It was said that her last words were, "Oh, you better not be shooting the birds again," and unfortunately, he wasn't. When his granddad arrived home, he met him in the driveway and shot him as well. That is unbelievable to think that he was actually let out after that and went on to kill 8 more people, all women. He would pick up female students who were hitchhiking and take them to an isolated area where he would take their lives in many different ways that I cannot mention here, and then take them back to his home and have his way with them. Next up is Rodney Alcala, also known as the dating game killer. He was convicted of 5 murders committed in the state of California between 1977 and 1979. He received an additional sentence of 25 years to life after pleading guilty to 2 additional homicides committed in New York. While he was conclusively linked to 8 murders altogether, the true number of his victims remains unknown, and they think that it can be much higher, around 30. He was known to have a collection of more than 1,000 photographs of teens, young women, and boys, many in very explicit poses. It was believed that he would toy with his victims, play with them like toys, and asphyxiate them until they passed out, and then play with them again. It reminds me of Dahmer, even with the pictures. Rodney was dubbed the dating game killer because he actually appeared on a television show in 1978 called The Dating Game, and this was right in the middle of his murder spree. That's unreal to me. Last, I have to mention one of the most infamous, Joseph James D'Angelo. That name may not ring a bell, but how about the Golden State Killer? I bet you've heard of him before, right? That's Joseph James D'Angelo. He committed at least 13 murders, 51 instances of forcible rape, and 120 burglaries across California between 1974 and 1986. He is responsible for at least 3 separate crime sprees throughout California, and each one of them gave him a different nickname. When he was in the San Joaquin Valley, he was known as the Visalia Ransacker, before moving into the Sacramento area, where he became known as the East Area Rapist. Then, committing serial murders in Santa Barbara, Ventura, and Orange County, he was known as the Night Stalker, later the original Night Stalker because Richard Ramirez was also called the Night Stalker. He was caught with the help of a crime writer named Michelle McNamara, and if you haven't read the book or seen the documentary called I'll Be Gone in the Dark, it's a must. I do not want to give away what happens if you haven't seen it, but it was the first case to be solved using genetic genealogy, which, by the way, has become a buzzword lately with the University of Idaho murder case. We don't even have actual concrete press releases or official documents mentioning that this was utilized at all. Yes, news stations have said it. Yes, people on Twitter have said it. But instead, all this probable cause affidavit mentioned was the good old parental DNA. But this is for another day. Yes, all of these serial killers that I just mentioned could have committed Barbara Becker's murder, but investigators could not find any evidence linking them to her crime. The investigation turned cold despite all of their best efforts. Unlike some other investigators, the San Diego Police Department wasn't one to let cold cases remain unsolved. They would revisit Barbara's investigation files all the time to see if there was anything they could do to solve it. An excellent and dedicated team of homicide investigators was involved in this investigation. So, despite working on all these other murder cases, they would still drive to La Jolla and speak to Barbara's neighbors. They were hoping that someone would give them new information. Nevertheless, no one could ever recall anything that would lead these homicide investigators to a suspect. To check on the status of Barbara's investigation, her family contacted the homicide division every year or two for updates. Barbara's brother wrote letters all the time to investigators, but Barbara's husband, Michael, could not talk to them. He was still emotional, which is to be expected. However, of course, he eventually remarried and became a prominent rheumatologist who was responsible for extensive research into gout, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, and how our genes affect those diseases. In the years that passed after Barbara Becker was murdered, she was always on the minds of the homicide investigators at the San Diego Police Department. She should have been safe. She was in her home. And if technology caught up, there was a potential to solve this case with the advancement of DNA technology. Investigators would test the DNA found at Barbara Becker's crime scene in hopes of finding a suspect. And things started to look up because in the 1990s, CODIS was established. We hear the word CODIS all the time, and I always forget what it stands for, but it's the Combined DNA Index System. It's the FBI's criminal justice DNA database, and it contains DNA profiles contributed by federal and state laboratories. The computer software operates local, state, and national databases of DNA profiles of convicted offenders, as well as unsolved crime scene evidence and missing persons, all throughout the 50 states. So there is a lot in this CODIS system. It also automatically generates investigative leads, and it uses 2 indexes, the Convicted Offender Index and the Forensic Evidence Index, which both include biological evidence that is recovered from a crime scene. I know that sounded like a lot. It is very technical. It is science after all. But the DNA profiles of those convicted of crimes range from misdemeanors to murder, and they are contained in this database. A DNA profile is submitted by an investigator, and then it's automatically compared with anyone in the CODIS computer software. By matching profiles in this forensic index, crime scenes can be linked together, and that's how we can identify serial killers. The computer system does it for us. We don't have to sit there poring over documents trying to make links anymore. An investigator may be able to identify a suspect based on a match made between the forensic index and the convicted offender index. The CODIS system had many advantages for law enforcement, such as taking DNA samples immediately after arrest, rather than waiting for a conviction. Having DNA on file speeds up the investigation process. You can identify the suspects faster, and you can prevent innocent people from being wrongly convicted. If we did this more often and collected DNA upon arrest, and it isn't done everywhere, this would eliminate those who are innocent immediately. It would save more time and money because these faster identifications lead to a shorter investigation and quicker outcomes for victims and their families. However, like I said, not all states do this. A lot of times you don't get your DNA taken unless you are convicted. But things are changing. A lot is changing. However, CODIS came with some disadvantages, including incomplete DNA samples, which can be mistaken for someone else's DNA. Even so, at the time of Barbara Becker's cold case, they were willing to accept the method's slight disadvantages. Since CODIS was established, the San Diego Police Department started closing criminal cases like crazy. They were matching DNA from older cases with DNA of newly convicted felons. I feel like it's one of the best inventions when it comes to crime solving. The DNA profile of an unknown male was found in the blood in Barbara Becker's kitchen and in the bathroom, and that was submitted to CODIS. But once again, despite all of these efforts, they did not get a hit. Therefore, they feared they would never be able to provide Barbara's loved ones with the answers that they deserved. If this person had not committed another crime since Barbara's murder, they wouldn't be in the database, since it did not exist at the time of the crime. So anything he did before Barbara's murder would not have a way to have been recorded. However, let's jump to April of 2018, because new DNA technology profoundly impacted the criminal justice system, and the world was hearing about it, like we still are right now, because we are in it. They heard about it because of a significant arrest in California. We just discussed this one. The following years of diligent and dedicated investigation, the Golden State serial killer was finally apprehended on April 24, 2018. This man was a former Navy veteran, a former police officer, and a father. We should all know his real name by now, Joseph James D'Angelo. After several decades of eluding the police and taunting them, how did the investigators finally identify this murderer? Well, the cold case investigators used a revolutionary technology I told you about, forensic genetic genealogy. Since September 2021, forensic genetic genealogy has uncovered over 100 murder and other criminal suspects and identified many Jane and John Does. These are victims without names. They went without names for so long. Now here's my chance to set the record straight about genetic genealogy, because it's complicated and it's being thrown around a lot in the media lately. Many people are misunderstanding what it is, and I understand it's truly hard to wrap my brain around it. But I truly try hard to understand things and get them right, so I hope I'm helping. Please pass it on after I explain. It's thought that our DNA is able to be used to solve crimes, and that is incorrect. Now you know that is not true. It is entirely illegal and a severe breach of privacy for any agency to take our DNA that's been submitted to these private companies and use it to match to an unsolved case. It would be great in some ways if these databases would open up for this DNA to be used for that purpose. For example, there are 12 million people that have submitted their DNA to 23andMe, including myself. Many people believe that using this DNA from these online databases violates their privacy rights, but strict rules have been established to protect us, to protect the public, especially when it comes to law enforcement. This can all be found on the 23andMe site. This is how 23andMe responds to law enforcement requests for customer information. It says, respect for customer privacy and transparency are the core principles that guide 23andMe's approach to responding to legal requests and maintaining customer trust. We will closely scrutinize all law enforcement requests, and we will only comply with court orders, subpoenas, search warrants, or other requests that we determine are legally valid. To date, we have not released any customer information to law enforcement. So, there you go. Now let me explain the truth. There are only two databases that openly allow authorities administrative access to run matches, and they are the genealogical databases, GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. I'm going to say it again. GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA provide genetic genealogy's investigative power. Now here's the thing, on GEDmatch, users can upload their DNA from any direct-to-consumer company such as Ancestry or 23andMe. So this is where I think it gets confusing. If you submit your DNA to 23andMe, you can get your raw data. I've done it. You can put that raw data into other databases, and you can put that into GEDmatch or Family Tree DNA if you want to be part of this revolutionary way to solve crimes. This innovative method of finding suspects is a lot easier now, thanks to the rise in consumer DNA products that I just mentioned. Now wait, let me go back because I want to explain what genetic genealogy is first, real fast. The word genealogy relates to studying or tracing the lines of family descent continuously from one ancestor. So when you see someone build out a family tree, they are mapping out genealogy. Wikipedia had an easy-to-understand definition of genealogy. It's the study of families, family history, and tracing of their lineages. Genealogists use oral interviews, historical records, genetic analysis, and other records to obtain information about a family and then try to find the kinship and pedigrees of its members. So, with that being said, you do not need DNA to make a family tree, and you usually don't have the DNA to create it. Professional genealogists use methods to trace back ancestry. They use many methods that I just mentioned. However, combining those techniques with one of the ancestors' or relatives' DNA can speed up the process and make it more accurate. We're getting closer to the combined definition here of genetic genealogy, I promise, but it combines that genetic factor. Genes are what make us who we are, and our genes are made of DNA. So therefore, if we take the DNA from a crime scene and there's no matching CODIS, meaning this person has never committed a prior offense, we used to be at a loss. But now, with GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA databases, this unknown DNA can be run through all of the known DNA of all those individuals who decided to submit their DNA for this purpose. This opens up the door to partial DNA matches against this unknown sample at the crime scene. There are limitations, and I will explain. Currently, there are 1.45 million people in GEDmatch, and in Family Tree DNA, there's almost 1 million people. That's not even close to the power of 23andMe, but it's a lot better than having no one to compare this unknown DNA to, right? So when they put it into these databases, there's a potential to find a partial, maybe not even a partial, a slight match with someone somewhere that has some of the same DNA as the suspect. But it's usually someone related at a far greater distance, meaning a fifth cousin, not a father. It's not an easy task. If you do get this partial match, you're still clueless about how it connects to the suspect, and that's where the genealogy comes in. Now, these professionals who know how to make those family trees use this one person as their starting point. Then they begin to build out that family tree and deduce who this unknown individual can be. Let's say they get a family tree down to 5 male individuals, and they look at all their ages. Let's say there's one in their 20s, but the crime was committed 40 years ago. They're ruled out. They go back to the family tree to find someone older, eventually possibly finding someone that they think matches the age. That's when they start to research that person. Where did they live at the time of the crime? How old were they? Did they know the victim? It isn't easy because there's a lot of legwork to still be done on a case. But wait, just wait. Now that you have an idea of how this works, let's go back to Barbara's case. The cold case unit decided to work on investigations within the San Diego Police Department that they believed had enough DNA evidence preserved from way back when to use investigative genetic genealogy. So investigators searched through binders and binders, looking for specific cases that had a lot of DNA left behind by the suspect. In particular, they were specifically looking at stabbing cases, because that's when a perpetrator has more likelihood of cutting themselves during an attack, leaving behind their blood. As these cold case investigators were going through these binders, they found Barbara Becker's binder, and they were shocked at how much DNA evidence was still preserved. Thankfully, those investigators were so diligent. 4 men, that's their whole team, and they were able to diligently preserve this. So the cold case unit pulls Barbara Becker's file, examines all the blood stains found in the bathroom and the kitchen, and it had all been blood typed. It was confirmed to be male. Barbara, the victim, was female, so they determined that the unknown male blood belonged to the killer. They decided that this case had so much potential to be solved using genetic genealogy. Until the Golden State Killer was caught, Barbara's murderer had been on the run for almost 40 years. They thought that it was about time to give her family some answers, if they could. So they uploaded this DNA profile from Barbara's crime scene to GEDmatch. Their goal was to identify a distant cousin of the suspect, and then build out the family tree. Then investigators would research the family to see if anyone was in the San Diego La Jolla area when Barbara was murdered in 1979. Before law enforcement can even access GEDmatch to search for a relative, they have to prove that they have exhausted all other investigative methods, such as CODIS, without success. Just so you know, in order for authorities to do this, they cannot do it secretly. They always have to present themselves as law enforcement, and they can only compare genetic markers. They cannot check for things like psychological risks or genetic diseases. That's off limits. I'm so glad that this exists and that it's being used the way it is, because to think that someone came into Barbara's home and did such an awful thing to her and just left to go about their normal life is just unfathomable to me. I don't understand how someone could be so heartless and just move on like nothing happened. When the suspect's DNA was entered into the database, it was determined that his ancestry was French-Canadian. This posed somewhat of an issue because these are American databases, so his family tree would be close to impossible to build out. However, over the decades, the French-Canadian family actually married into American families. Luckily, the suspect shared a little bit, just some of DNA, with a family whose last name was Chartrand. So they began building out this family tree, and finally, they had someone that seemed to match up. His name was Paul Jean Chartrand. But how did they figure this out? It honestly seems like witchcraft, but rest assured it is a science and investigative work. When they ran Paul's name for a background check, they found out he was living in San Diego when Barbara was murdered. Not only that, he owned a business in La Jolla, so that is a major lead. They aren't just picking anyone off this family tree, they have to make it make sense. He owned a carpet cleaning company a mere 3/4 of a mile away from Barbara's home, and Paul was out on bail awaiting trial for a charge for him forcing himself on a woman. This was around the time that Barbara was killed. This was enough for them to look deeper into who Paul was. They found out that Paul Jean Chartrand was born October 21, 1951, in Montreal, Canada, but he made his way to the United States. They were able to track down his ex-wife and 2 biological sons, who were currently living in Southern California. His family confirmed that he was living in San Diego at the time of Barbara's murder in 1979. As they looked deeper into his past, they found out he was a convicted offender, and you probably know what kind I'm talking about. I told you what he was out on bail for. Before they tracked him down to obtain a sample of his DNA to test it against their suspects, the investigators wanted to put together as much information as possible, including his potential motive. Since Paul was a sexual deviant, investigators decided this might be the motive for the murder. Maybe Barbara entered the carpet cleaning store as a customer, or she could have just been walking around in this neighborhood, shopping, doing her daily routine, and she caught his eye. There were not that many people living there, so it could be a very likely scenario. Then, this killer most likely followed Barbara, maybe even stalked her for some time, before finally he couldn't take it anymore, and he had to go one step further and carry out his dark fantasy. They believe he entered Barbara's house that March afternoon to kill her. They think he probably entered the house as she was getting ready for her hair appointment. He grabbed a knife from the kitchen, snuck up on her. But that's not to say that Barbara did anything wrong at all. This man chose to come inside a home that did not belong to him and to act out a disgusting crime. Paul's adult sons wanted to assist in the investigation, and other relatives of Paul were also very willing to help in any way they could. One of his sons graciously spoke to investigators, and they told him they thought it was his dad who committed Barbara's murder. They were shocked when his son replied that he was pretty sure his father was the killer. He told them that his father was mean, and as a child, Paul's son said that Paul would throw him against walls in their house. At this point, investigators were confident that they had their suspect. Their suspicions were confirmed once they compared the DNA profile found at the crime scene to that of Paul's son. It was a direct match. Exactly 40 years to the day after Barbara's murder, investigators found her killer. Paul would have been close to 30 at the time that he killed Barbara. This is what he looks like. And honestly, to me, he's just so unassuming. He even smiles in his photos. I wouldn't expect someone that looks like that to have done something like this. But there's an issue with making an arrest and getting Paul's DNA. His family gives them the bad news. Paul died in 1995. But this is just so disappointing because you want justice for what Paul did to Barbara. Paul died August 13, 1995, in Arizona at 43 years old. He had moved to Arizona right after Barbara's murder, and when he was out on bail, his bail was so low, it was just unjustified, especially for what he did. Barbara may still be alive today if he had been in jail back in 1979, like he should have been. However, they still will never know why Paul did what he did. They couldn't ask him, and they couldn't figure out why he would choose Barbara. The investigators finally contacted Barbara's husband to share the bittersweet news, and Dr. Becker appreciated the efforts that the San Diego Police Department put forth. After he informed his two sons and Barbara's brother about the information, he asked the media to please give them space and time. I actually could not find any of their names, so they really did honor their wishes. They did feel relieved that Barbara's killer was dead, since no one thought they could face this man who murdered her if they had to go to trial. A few days before the news was released that Barbara's murderer had been identified 40 years after her death, investigators contacted Paul's family. They appreciated the tip from law enforcement. The family was horrified to learn that Paul had been involved in a crime of this magnitude. The investigators who closed Barbara's case described his family as wonderful and helpful people. So I wanted you to remember this. So many times, we want to place blame on the family of a suspect or a killer, and rightfully so. They're the flesh and blood of this person who took someone's life. But the parents and children of a suspect or a killer are not responsible. They can't control what their relatives do, and usually they have no connection to their crimes whatsoever. It's devastating for them to know that their loved one was responsible for something like this, and they have to grieve as well. At the time of the press announcement that Paul was Barbara's killer, many of the homicide investigators who worked on her murder case over the years, 4 decades later, were retired, including Gary Gleon. But they were thrilled when they heard the news, and they were surprised because this Paul person had never been on their radar. They were commended for all their hard work in preserving and saving the evidence that was later used to give closure to Barbara's family 40 years later. And they should be very proud of what they did in her case. Investigators would not have been able to solve this crime without genetic genealogy. It is a vital tool, and it's going to be even more vital. The process is minimally intrusive to all the parties except the offender, and to think about how many cases it can be used to solve in the future. Investigators hope that they can provide other families with answers using genetic genealogy. Just back in 2009, there were several cold cases that were solved using genetic genealogy, including Barbara's. But there was Scott Martinez's family. They received answers in 2019 after he was repeatedly stabbed with a sword back in 2006. And it certainly will not be the last time that investigators strive to bring answers to families by using this technology. I am so sorry to Barbara's family, especially her two young sons. I hope that they were able to find joy in their lives despite such a horrific tragedy. I wanted to point out that it's been said, as I stated, that the suspect in custody right now connected to the University of Idaho case was found using genetic genealogy, but it's never been officially reported anywhere. Instead, in the probable cause affidavit, it explains that a single source of male DNA was recovered from a knife sheath that was found next to one of the victims, Maddie Mogan. That DNA was put through CODIS, and there was no match. However, they had ring camera footage of a white Hyundai Elantra speeding away from the scene at approximately 4:25 a.m., following the time that they believed the murders occurred, and they noticed it didn't have a front license plate. So when they were doing their investigation into all the white Elantras in that area, they got a hit on one of them that was involved in a traffic stop back in August, and it was registered in Pennsylvania at the time. Well, in the state of Pennsylvania, they do not require a front license plate, and that was a big clue. They tracked down the person listed on that traffic stop. His name was Brian Koberger. He lived less than 10 miles away from where the murders took place. So far, this is not genetic genealogy, it's just investigative work. Then, they obtained cell phone records and were able to pinpoint that his cell phone pinged off towers in the area of the murder at various times in the late hours of the night into the early morning hours, at least 12 times, before the murder. Suspiciously, it did not ping there when the murders were being committed, but it pinged at a tower close to Brian's apartment. Then it seemed to be shut off or in airplane mode, but then it starts to ping again after the murders, leaving the area of the crime. This is what truly led them to Brian as a potential suspect. They merely confirmed his identity with a parental DNA test through his father's DNA that they retrieved from the family's home back in the Poconos. When they tracked Brian's movements across the country right before Christmas, they tested items from the trash can, and that DNA matched at a 99.9% probability as being the father of the unknown DNA that they got from the crime scene. Brian is the only son in the Koberger family, so that's not genetic genealogy, it's a paternity test, if you will. I just wanted to clear that up. Not to say that there wasn't any genetic genealogy that they did in the case prior to testing Brian's father's DNA, but I hope that helped, along with all the information that I laid out about how this whole process works. Now maybe you can add your own 2 cents online when people drop the method of genetic genealogy.